morning. Today is Tuesday, February 11th, 2020. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect that Commissioners Decker, Goldsmith, Sobroff, and Bonner are present, and we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Sir, Mr. Foster, please don't shut out during the meetings. I really don't want to have to excuse you. Thank you, sir. The first item on today's agenda, regular item 1A, is the department's fourth quarter report on homelessness. Commander?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If I may introduce Ms. Mindy Pfeiffer from the Mayor's Office. She is a regional coordinator at the Mayor's Unified Homeless Response Center, and she works as one of the coordinators of services there. And when we get to that portion of the presentation, I'm going to ask her to give you some of her insights as to the launch of the CARE program, which occurred on October 1st.
Thank you. And Commander, you were just here, I think it was 3 weeks ago on January 21st with the third quarter report. This is the fourth quarter report, obviously. I assume now we've caught up to date, and
yes, ma'am.
We'll be going forward in the future more in more timely fashion. If you could briefly give us an overview of the highlights, particularly changes between the third and fourth quarter, I'd certainly appreciate that, sir.
Yes, ma'am. If I may, thank you again, members of the Commission. Good morning. As it relates to crime, I'll start there. For total homeless-related Part 1 crime, it fell by one crime in the fourth quarter as compared to fourth quarter in 2018. But in that net decrease, there were some significant gains in violent crime. Homicides for the quarter fell by 4, rapes for the quarter fell by 8. Robberies for the quarter fell by 9, for a net reduction in 13 violent crimes for the quarter. Unfortunately, there was an increase of +8 in aggravated assault crimes, which brought the net back to 13.
And Commander, you're comparing fourth quarter 2019 to 18.
Yes,
is that
ma'am.
right? Okay.
And all of the crime comparisons will be as such. In crimes where a homeless person was identified as the suspect, homicides increased by 4, robberies increased by 36. Aggravated assaults increased by 31, and fortunately, rapes were down by 8. Total property crimes where a suspect was identified as homeless was down 21 crimes. In crimes where a homeless person was identified as the victim, we had crime down in all violent crime categories for a total of 48 crimes lower in the violent crime categories, and unfortunately there was an increase in 22% of property crimes, which was fueled by an increase of 37 thefts reported by persons experiencing homelessness. Moving on to arrests for the fourth quarter of 2019, the felony arrests increased by 10 overall, with notable increases in robbery by 20, which is commensurate with the increase in robberies that were committed by persons experiencing homelessness. Criminal threats by 24, parole and probation violations by 35, domestic violence by 15, and arrests for aggravated assault warrants by 11. And although there was a reduction of 24 of arrests for aggravated assaults in relation to the increase in aggravated assaults where a homeless individual was the suspect, domestic violence, parole and probation violations, aggravated assault warrants, and criminal threats all also go into that package. So we find that our analysis is that the arrest pattern there is consistent with the crime pattern that we found in the fourth quarter. Custodial misdemeanor arrests decreased by 3 overall, with decreases in possession of narcotics, failure to appear warrants, that was a reduction of 58, and failure to appear on traffic warrants, which was 36. There were some notable increases in violation of court orders, which is 23, and our dive into that piece showed that there was an increase in persons violating the restraining orders of courts that were put to them as conditions of convictions of other crimes. There were 29, in misdemeanor warrant arrests, the breakdown there was an increase. 42 additional warrants for vehicle code misdemeanors, such as DUI, driving on a suspended license, and reckless driving. There were 29 warrant arrests for fare evasions. These are not citations for fare evasion. These are people who were found that didn't appear in court on a fare evasion citation, and the warrant was issued for their arrest. 19 for warrants about resisting arrest, 18 for drunken public. The release from custody citations for misdemeanors.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
Commander, we did read the report.
Okay.
If you could just give us some highlights, so I think the commissioners may have questions, and we'd certainly like to hear from Ms. Pfeiffer as well.
Very well, ma'am. So just to cover that, the citation misdemeanors, although it's up, if you look again, and we have been discussing this in my last two presentations with fare evasions. So if you were actually to extract out fare evasions over the 2 quarters, there would be a reduction of 17% overall in misdemeanors citations. The report shows a reduction of 800 MEU smart contacts. And when we reached out to MEU to ask them about that, what we discovered was 2018 Q4 was a statistical anomaly as far as increases. So going back the previous 3 years, there was an incremental increase of between 20 and 40 calls in 2015, 16, and 17. In 2018, that number jumped up by almost 1,000 calls into the 5,400 range, and then settled back to the norm, the regression to the mean, if you will, in 2019. So that 800 increase is a result of a statistical spike in 2019 for the same, 2018 for that quarter. Based on the questions at the last presentation, we did take a look at the non-categorical uses of force for this, for the Q4 that involved persons experiencing homelessness. There was an increase of 6 incidents over the Q4 of 2018, which represented an increase of 3% of uses of force involving persons experiencing homelessness, which was actually less than the growth of the department-wide increase of 6% in categorical uses of force. When we actually drilled into the 181 categorical uses of force involving persons experiencing homelessness, what we found that if you look at the type of force used, 82% of the time, bodily force only was used as the force, which includes firm grip, body weight, and takedowns. That's 148 of the 181. A taser was deployed 19 times, as representing 10% of the incidents. A chemical agent was deployed 1% of the time, and beanbags or 40 millimeters were deployed 12 times, representing 6.5. Now, if you take those numbers and compare it to the uses of force of persons not identified experiencing homelessness, the numbers are almost identical. So the force options for persons not experiencing homelessness are 82% bodily force, similar to the 82% for persons experiencing homelessness, taser at 11% as opposed to 10%, beanbags at 5.2 as opposed to 6.5 for persons experiencing homelessness, and there were 2 applications of baton for persons not experiencing homelessness and none of chemical agent. So our analysis of that number is that there is no change in the approach that officers in the field are taking towards persons experiencing homelessness when they react to those actions that escalate to a use of force. We found, we looked into the type of call that was generated for it. We found a similar reflection in the numbers for persons experiencing homelessness and the population of persons not experiencing homelessness. And by that I mean radio call, citizen flag down, or observation activity. When it comes to persons who are injured as a result of use of force, 40% of the time, a person who is experiencing homelessness involved in a use of force incident is injured by the use of force. That's as opposed to 55% of the time when it is an individual not experiencing homelessness. So again, that supports our analysis that there's no change in the way police officers are dealing with their reactions to persons who, where use of force is escalated and necessary. Categorical uses of force for the period are down by 2 to 2, and in those 2 there was an in-custody death and there was an officer-involved shooting in Hollenbeck Division. There is an increase, a significant increase in contacts by reset officers in the Q4 to the tune of an increase of 1,980. I'm happy to report that reset has recently engaged in a partnership with USC where a social worker and 3 to 4 interns twice a week for 4 to 6 hours a day go into Skid Row and magnify the outreach efforts of the reset officers. They said that during the fourth quarter, that related to between 1,200 and 1,300 additional contacts just because of that team. And they're trying to connect those people to services both with and without the assistance of the reset team. In addition, for the fourth quarter of 2019, Reset stood at full strength, averaging 48 officers per day in their deployment, as opposed to 32 per day in the fourth quarter of 2018. So the increased deployment and that new program has led to that significant increase in contacts. Transit Services Division, we had this discussion a few weeks ago, and they continue to have issues with their personnel. During the fourth quarter of 2014, they had 2 individuals that underwent surgery, and they had another 2 individuals who went on bonding leave. Their average deployment throughout the fourth quarter of 2019 was 6, as opposed to 10 in the fourth quarter of 2018. Although we foresee the folks that were on bonding leave coming back to work within the first quarter, we're still waiting to hear whether or not the individuals who went out on surgery are going to be back in a full duty capacity within the first quarter of 2020. When we get into the narrative version, this was again the first quarter where we went into the CARE model along with the mayor's office and the city. I've included a chart on page 20 of the report that shows the first 3 months of the CARE model. And just to footnote it really quickly, the number of police responses to CARE operations went from less than 1% in October, which was the initial rollout month, to 4.3% in November, to 8.3% in December. And that steady increase, I believe, is due to the CARE teams becoming more interactive with the individuals that are experiencing homelessness in their particular areas. And as those relationships are still being built, there is some pushback and there is some friction that develops in the field. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mandy now, who's been on the ground in the UHRC monitoring these activities, to give you some insights about the CARE program.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Commissioners. It's my responsibility for the CARE program. I'm the place-based strategy person. So I go out throughout the entire city to observe CARE and CARE Plus operations. Part of that job is to make sure that the CARE teams, LAHSA and sanitation, are briefing in the mornings and debriefing in the afternoons. I also speak to all residents, housed and unhoused. We've seen an uptick in assaults against sanitation workers. That can be anything like being spat on. Yesterday, a sanitation worker was threatened with a 24-inch knife, told that he would be killed, and that generated a backup call. This hasn't stopped the sanitation workers. They haven't left these CARE teams. They've joined these teams because they want to be a part of making a difference in their communities. It can depend on the time of day that a CARE team shows up. I wake up sometimes on the wrong side of bed, and so do our unhoused neighbors. So they can be cranky and they don't want to move. And so we will ask LAPD to come in and help enforce, just so that the cleaning operations can continue. I've seen sanitation workers connect with folks as much, and if not better, than some LAHSA outreach workers. You have these men and women working in solids, and it's just their job to collect the trash. But they'll recognize if a resident's not around one day. And the next time they see them, they'll check in and make sure that they're doing okay. So the relationship-based model of CARE is working. It's not going to happen overnight, but relationships are being formed. We have some places in the city where it's been the same CARE Plus team since the inception, meaning the same sanitation, environmental compliance officers, the same solids workers, and the same outreach folks. We also have some teams where burnout is a thing, it happens. And so we might cycle in some different lead ECIs every couple of weeks, just so that people don't experience burnout, because that's when that's when accidents might occur. It's because it's a relationship-based model, because folks living in the street have pretty good reason not to trust very easily. It's taken this amount of time to really start to show a difference. And I think our last resort is to call in the police, but if folks' lives are in danger, we're certainly going to do that. We will make a note if we're going to a site that previously we've had to call in the police for support, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to call them in that day. We're very aware of all the dangers out there. What else?
We'll open it up to questions for the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldsmith, I know you've frequently taken the lead on these reports and have worked on these issues for years. If you wouldn't mind going
Thank
first.
you. Thank you for the report, thorough as always. You recently shared some statistics with me that I requested that showed the trajectory of personal service citations and RFCs since the first report that we did, which was Q1 of 2017. So that was when we initiated the effort to redoubled the effort to use law enforcement as a last resort with people experiencing homelessness and to really focus on decriminalizing homelessness. And the trajectory over that 3-year period is much better than what we're seeing today compared to a year ago today. So 23% reduction in release from custody arrests of people experiencing homelessness and a 15% reduction of personal service citations of people experiencing homelessness. So, I mean, that's certainly a positive trajectory since the department really started focusing on this, and I am very glad to see that, and I know that that takes a tremendous amount of effort, particularly when the department is responding to a lot of pressure from elected officials and residents to just get rid of people experiencing homelessness, and I can see that the department is not being pulled entirely in that direction. Of course, some of the trends we're seeing today as compared to this quarter last year indicate some problems maybe over the last year in terms of troubling increases in RFCs and personal service citations. So you've commented on that if you have anything else more to say, but I just want to say on the record that those increases trouble me, although I'm glad to see the trajectory over the last 3 years going in the right direction. Troubled to see the increase in reset contacts. I mean, we talked about reset going in more of the model of hope, and I wonder how that's going, and I generally think increased reset contacts is problematic. So, I mean, maybe you can just kind of respond to that with the overarching question of how do you feel the department is doing in terms of decriminalizing homelessness and using law enforcement as a last resort in light of these statistics, and particularly with the CARE program coming in, which I understand is meant to live up to its name and is meant to not over-deploy police officers to cleanups. However, I can appreciate that the intention of the model is to be relationship-based and to have a kind of care approach. Many people experiencing homelessness, their experience with law enforcement is the opposite of that, and that while a sanitation worker or a LAHSA worker or even a police officer may be attempting to develop a positive relationship, the unintended consequence of law enforcement and that the show of force in these situations when we're taking people's only property away from them, their only place to live, and they're there because society has completely failed them. I think we may be underestimating the impact that law enforcement is having, even if they're not intervening, but especially when they are. So I have a few more questions, but I'll pause there for any responses you have to any of that.
So to the question about the increase in reset contacts, when I was in contact with the Central Command and discussing that, the contacts themselves are not necessarily law enforcement contacts; they're outreach contacts. And so contacts to the tune of 12 to 1,300 that were made by the social worker and their interns in an attempt to use a different model to connect people to services by setting up a static command post in an area of Skid Row is a demonstration of that piece. They're working with and through the umbrella of Reset, but they're working for the express purpose of trying to connect people to services and not in an enforcement capacity, as they are not in themselves law enforcement officers. The general piece about the decriminalization that's my overarching goal in this job, is to ensure that we have common operating picture throughout the department as to what does it mean to lead with services first, what does last resort mean, and how do we utilize the tools that we have so that we're not putting handcuffs on people as the natural default setting to a law enforcement contact. So looking at diversion programs, we've begun the discussions with the LA DOOR program through the city attorney's office to expand their narcotics diversion, not just for the narcotics in the pilot projects, but to see if there's an expansion quotient there for homeless and folks that do get into legal issues as a result of their statuses, individuals experiencing homelessness, and how can we divert them away from the criminal justice system and bolster their connection to services. So we're going to continue to explore all of those avenues and continue to push training out. I've completed my first sweep through the city for senior lead officers, have had face-to-face conversations with carrying on the work of Chief Choi, and now I'm going to begin that cycle again. Through the 2020 year. We're also in March planning to have a training day for elements of the organization to again invite the mayor's office, the city attorney's office, LASA, and make sure that the officers that are out there who are not senior lead officers, who are not Reset, who are not HOPE, understand what that philosophy is, what the vision of the chief is, and understand in a real practical way how to apply that in the field. And so we're going to continue that training individually. I have a new senior lead officer, Robert Chalou, who's begun to go to roll calls and interface with the patrol officers at their communication level and able to in real time answer those questions and demonstrate what those things look like. Services led and enforcement as last resort are concepts, and trying to get those concepts into a real concrete behaviors for those officers, I think is very important to me. So as we push forward in 2020, those are my goals.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I do think training and efforts that sort of culture change are critically important. And as I said, I mean, the trajectory over the last 3 years in terms of decriminalization is positive, but then we look at this last year of personal service citations, crossing the roadway against a do not walk signal, walking on a freeway, this large category of other, failure to stop at a red light, walking outside the crosswalk. I mean, all these things that have dramatically increased your personal service citations over the last year that are criminalizing people who are experiencing homelessness. How do you kind of explain that in the context of your overarching efforts to decriminalize homelessness?
There are still efforts in place to use enforcement because of the increase in accidents that are resulting in injuries and deaths, and in many cases pedestrians being the individuals who are doing that. That's not to say that we couldn't do a better job at presenting the explanation to the department, and we'll endeavor to do that. But I do know that there has been a focus on concentrating on primary collision factors that are causing the serious injuries and deaths by traffic collision throughout the city. And what you're seeing is a result of that. As we discussed in a previous presentation, the last time we looked at the number, the percentage of citations that are given to persons experiencing homelessness are not the ratio of citations that are given to people who are not identified as homelessness are consistent or more so than the rate of citations that are given to persons who are experiencing homelessness. And so we're trying to use the tools that we have. We're not, I believe, not overusing them with persons experiencing homelessness.
And last time we met, members of the community came forward and shared that this concept of aggressive homeless enforcement zones or something. What was the? Transient suppression. Thank you, aggressive transient suppression. And at the time there were questions about what is there wasn't clarity that folks up here knew what that was. Have you learned more about that, and can you comment on how that's being deployed?
So the Office of Operations did take a look at the Hollywood Division and the use of that term, or in their daily crime missions. What we discovered is that that wasn't meant to be an adjective as far as aggressive transient or aggressive enforcement. It was originally meant to be an identifier about the aggressive behavior of some individuals in those areas. The Office of Operations has put out a notice and has discussed in OO Direct reports that this is not within the vision of the Chief of Police. As far as the messaging that we're sending out, not only to the officers, but the messaging that we're sending out to the public. And so identifying individuals and behaviors that are specific and not so general to utilize terminology like that. So we're making those changes and monitoring the products from these crime analysis units to ensure that that's happening.
Okay, I appreciate that. So last sort of topic, I was reviewing the recent LAHSA report on the disproportionate number of Black people who experience homelessness, and it's of course wildly disproportionate. At the time of the study, it was 9% of people in Los Angeles are Black and 40% of people experiencing homelessness are Black. And the report talked about homelessness as a byproduct of racism in America, and it began to identify the institutional and structural racism in many systems, education, criminal justice, housing, employment, healthcare, that are leading to an overrepresentation of Black people among the population of people experiencing homelessness. And specifically identify the interconnectedness of homelessness and incarceration as creating a revolving door that keeps people in the system and keeps reproducing harm for Black people. It also talked about care and empathy as being key elements of any interactions with people experiencing homelessness and any programs or policies that are designed to address homelessness. And finally recommends that we advance racially equitable policies and programs and funding across all institutions that interact with people experiencing homelessness. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about that, and in particular, how can the LAPD and the Police Commission be part of this effort to advance racially equitable policies programs with regard to our interactions with people experiencing homelessness? How can we really work to dismantle, the structural racism that's contributing to this problem that then, police officers are called in to address a problem like homelessness that's created by all of these structural factors, and then by the very way that police officers show up, with guns and as police officers to do things like take people's property and their homes, is really perpetuating that racism and perpetuating the harm that's being done to people experiencing homelessness in general and Black people in particular. So curious your response to that and how we might take a proactive effort to use that lens on our work and address those issues from a more proactive standpoint.
Sorry, Commissioner. I just want to remind the members of the public to please keep the comments down. It makes it very difficult to hear the details of every question and response. Thank you.
I think that historically the department is continuously striving to get better at that recognition. The introduction of the implicit bias training, the consistent messaging throughout the organization about the importance of building trust in communities, and especially reaching into communities that have historically not had the trust level with the organization, are part of that from an overarching level. From the standpoint of homelessness, the continuous work in the shared responsibility model with our partners in outreach, with our partners in sanitation, with the elected officials, with the service providing community, and helping us get an idea of what best practices are about talking, approaching, and more permanent solutions, so that we can fade into that position where we belong, which is part of a chorus that's necessary, that's only required when necessary, and that the leads on this be the social fabric that is necessary to rebuild what has caused these issues in the first place. And so as I continue in this role and building those relationships with my team, with service providers, we're inviting them to take part in the development of our training. The training day that's coming up in March, we want to bring in LAHSA and have them do a robust discussion with our officers about their best practices in the outreach, in the how to talk to people who are experiencing homelessness, the recognition of trauma, and how we can better deal with that and build on the lessons that we've learned in MHIT and in our own history. So while that might not be the concrete answer at the moment, taking from the general about the movement the department's taken in the last 2 decades and applying that to specifically the development of homeless policy and homeless practices, we are going to continue down that path and continue to collaborate with those that want to collaborate and be part of that voice.
Well, I appreciate. Oh, go for yes. Sir.
Commissioner, if I just might add too, I think the efforts of this, for instance, in 2 data points that you referenced, crossing roadway or walking on the freeway, areas that you see where we have or fare evasions, where you see efforts by the department reported in here as increases. The department recognizes these as opportunities to understand what's happening at a geographic level. For instance, the walking on a freeway centers in North Hollywood area. At the juncture of the 101 freeway and the 170 freeway, there's a series of freeway embankments in which there's been persistent community complaints and concerns for encampments that have been on those embankment areas. And so North Hollywood, as part of an outreach and engagement, has sought to get voluntary compliance for people to vacate those areas. They pose a danger to those individuals themselves as well as to the surrounding areas. And in the face of people's refusal or in unwillingness to comply, there have been those issuance of citations. What we use is this as an opportunity though to say, okay, let's go back at that model again and understand what other further changes can be done along that freeway area to achieve safety without having to resort to the enforcement. And the same happened with fare evasion that we saw, and you saw the report in the 3rd quarter, and then it transitioned into the 4th quarter, and you saw the numbers in December versus October. You saw a market decrease in enforcement, substantial, to a few instances rather than many. And I think that this again speaks to the concern that you recognize, which is we recognize the impact we're having on communities of color, particularly on enforcement. We recognize that these communities are impacted by social injustices and challenges that far exceed law enforcement's ability to fix. And we're advocating that homelessness as this humanitarian crisis be solved and addressed through social programming, through resources. It is not our desire at all for us to be the tool or the instrument in which to address these challenges. And instead, mental health awareness, mental health outreach workers, social programming such as not just substance abuse services, but housing, and getting those resources 24/7, 365 is a persistent and ongoing advocacy that from my seat, and I welcome its continued advocacy from this commission. We as a society have to do a much better job in dealing with this crisis through means other than law enforcement.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your sincere willingness to look at this, your lack of defensiveness, and your commitment to, or your identification and acknowledgement that you're being pulled in to address the results of many structural inequalities, including racism. And I think part of the challenge here, like one of the things that the LAHSA report said is that many people experiencing homelessness when they go to shelters are actually traumatized or re-traumatized in those shelters. And so I wonder if there's an analogous question we ask, and many books have been written on this, and many people experiencing homelessness have shared with me that in fact interactions with the police similarly are traumatizing or re-traumatizing. Even if those interactions have the best intentions, that's still the result of them. And so, I appreciate the point too about advocacy, and obviously always want to do whatever we can to advocate for for resources to be invested in a care-first approach into social services and housing and approaches that do not involve law enforcement. And I appreciate that you always say that. And yet, there's a long way to go because the department is still being pulled into using enforcement to deal with a social problem, and in fact, maybe making it much worse just by virtue of the presence of law enforcement. So that being said, I wonder if we could have maybe at the next quarterly report when LAHSA comes in to really just set aside some time for them to share their relevant findings with regard to Black people who are experiencing homelessness and whatever they learned from that process in regards to the way that people interact with the police, and how they would recommend that we be part of this effort that they've called upon all institutions and departments in Los Angeles to get involved in, which is to advance this racially equitable approach and to apply that lens to the work of all of the departments that interact with people experiencing homelessness. So I would really appreciate their thoughts, and maybe we can involve some of the folks who are advocates and people experiencing homelessness and hear their perspectives and open up more of a dialogue to just have a greater understanding of the role that we're playing in perpetuating this and what role we can play in really dismantling racism and really beginning to help and solve homelessness as opposed to inadvertently making it worse.
I'd like to add that the Homeless Help Desk has access to free, thanks to the FAME Corporation, Metro passes for anyone experiencing homelessness. And I know we've shared that at the UHRC to the Metro officers. So I know when they come across someone now, especially around Union Station, they let them know that they can get free transit available to them. It's also available, I believe, through the jails. I think connecting people after they're released from any jail, having a homelessness liaison of sorts, much like we have victim advocates, might be something to look into. We realize that unhoused neighbors are victimized as well. I think we see so many people who are killed because they're walking in the streets, and we've started now to reach out. So at the UHRC, if we receive a DOC communication that says a homeless individual was a victim of crime, we immediately reach out to LAHSA. If there's a case manager, we alert that case manager. If it's happened near an encampment, LAHSA goes out to provide resources at that encampment. And so we're doing a lot of victim advocacy now, much more than we used to in the past, understanding that folks are traumatized and they might not be willing to call police like housed folks are, but we work with them knowing that they're victims of crime and knowing that they do have a distrust. So I think maybe sharing more of our resources is a very good approach. There are definitely resources out there that police can guide folks to stop them from getting a ticket for not having the fare in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Soboroff.
I have two questions. First of all, one of our chaplains, LAPD chaplain Martin Furtak in the Valley, has in Topanga, in the Topanga Division, has a pilot program where they are taking a compilation of many services, whether it's a meal from a church or housing or other things that can be helpful to people experiencing homelessness, and training our officers to make those recommendations when they're called in right at the time. And what I've seen of the program, it's a pilot program, but it involves the chaplain, the services, and then the rank and file officers at the roll calls saying, we have these resources available, and not to wait till they're in jail or whatever has happened, but proactively. I urge you to take a hard look at it. I'm going to ask them to come to commission after the pilot's over and see what can be done if it's working. for our officers as another tool in dealing in situations versus as their primary interaction. The question I have is, in the fourth quarter, in the third quarter, in this quarter, are we getting an increase or a decrease in people experiencing homelessness reaching out to us, asking us to be involved in situations that are crime against them?
So if the crime reporting system is an accurate metric of that, and I'm not saying that it is.
It's one metric.
It is a metric. The increase in property crimes, I believe, is going to be is going to shed some light on the increased relationships between officers in the field and the persons experiencing homelessness. Generally, property crimes go unreported, but as you see the increase, like the number of property crimes was driven by an increase in thefts. Well, that means that persons experiencing homelessness had the trust level to come and report those thefts to the police. So, again, I don't know what the coefficient of correlation is between those two, but the idea that there is an increase where those numbers were very, very low going back into previous quarter reports is at least a demonstration of the outreach efforts by officers and getting people who are in the state of homelessness to trust the criminal justice system to at least reach out that their stuff has been taken. Beyond that, we sure don't have a capture mechanism that I'm aware of to do that. I am meeting after this meeting with my 4 Hope Sergeants in our regularly scheduled meeting, and I'll pose that question to them about what could we do as far as capture metrics to understand what that looks like, and if there is a change in the temperature of the relationship as far as from the standpoint of the various communities in Los Angeles and the persons experiencing homelessness within them.
And last question, something that you brought up about sanitation workers being, I don't want to say attacked, I want to say assaulted to the point where they have to call us and say, we're not going there without you. I hear that from EMTs, I hear that from fire. Do we have any metrics on that where we're not going in there? We're being asked by other first responders or other service providers to accompany them because they won't go without us.
Do you want to talk about that from your HRC standpoint? Because I could talk about it from a policy standpoint.
There's a discussion now out in the city that if you spit on a sanitation worker, sanitation teams will leave, and the care operation is over. So that's become a strategy for some folks.
Mr. Smith, please do not shout out during the meeting.
I can also say that care teams, we hear more now from unhoused folks. If they feel threatened by someone in an encampment around them, they've begun to tell us about it. I'm not sure where that info goes. It does go to LAHSA, but they've begun to report crimes against themselves to our care teams.
By by design, the collaboration between LAHSA, LASAN, and ourselves in the UHRC is meant to identify locations where there has been some previous articulatable behavior or individuals who have clearly demonstrated the violent tendencies towards the workers that come out to them. In the first 3 months of the pilot, that was only 5 locations throughout the city that were identified with that. I don't know what it is for January yet, but we're going to continue to track those locations. There is also in the protocol for Care Plus operations, which are the pre-posted operations where a polygon is established and then individuals are then advised to collect their belongings and relieve the polygon for the cleanup. Police do arrive with them. Members of the HOPE team do arrive with them, just to ensure that that there is compliance. And once it's clear that compliance has been achieved, and with the concurrence of the ECI supervisor from sanitation, then that unit clears. So that's the policy that we currently have for care operations in the city.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonner?
Thank you very much. Just a couple of clarifications to help me understand both this report and then future reports. And you have the report?
Yes, sir.
With you. So I'm going to just start on page 12. There's a discussion at the top of that page about the decrease in the use of force, and it's attributed to the engagement with the mental health intervention training units. And I wanted you to elaborate on that briefly. In particular, is this a broad and general observation, or is there a specific initiative or effort that you're thinking of that is attributed to the decrease in use of force?
Well, part of the process of becoming a HOPE or a reset officer is to go through the MHIT training. That was established before MHIT training became standardized in the PLC, the returning school for all officers that they go back to at the end of their probationary period. So the idea that officers that are going to daily interact with persons experiencing homelessness have that advanced awareness and MHIT training, I think, is a contributing factor on a general sense to the reason that the numbers are lower. The other one is I believe is pure mechanics. Our HOPE officers and our reset officers are not responding to radio calls where we're already at a post-crisis circumstance. They're responding and they're building relationships and talking to people when they're in pre-crisis mode. And so their interactions with them are much less critical and would be much less likely to advance into a use of force type of situation as it would be with a responding unit like a patrol unit.
Appreciate that. I'm going to go on to page 19. A quick question. You referenced just a moment ago, again, the CARE and the CARE Plus. What is the CARE Plus?
So CARE Plus is a enhanced services model where first, is there someone from sanitation? Oh, okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith, sir, this is your final warning about shouting out during meetings, please, sir.
So the taking from the Operation Healthy Streets model, a posting is done in an area defining the area that will be cleaned, and the rules about taking property out of that. On the day of a CARE Plus operation, there are streets shut down because sanitation generally uses heavy equipment and or bleaching chemicals to clean the streets. Individuals are given time to pack up their things and move outside of the definition of that polygon. At the same time, the CARE Plus model was intended to introduce sanitation or showers and cleaning opportunities. Thank you. My vocabulary fled. Hygiene centers to deploy out into with the care teams. They're started with one citywide. They're at four. There are four now. There are four now that go out regularly with care operations, and there are 17 CARE Plus teams in the city. So the plan is to expand those hygiene facilities to all 17 CARE Plus operations. So while there's an intensive cleaning going on in the location, the persons who may have been displaced temporarily by that operation have a place to relieve themselves and refresh themselves. That is as opposed to the care operations, which are about bulky item cleanup and ADA compliance specifically. That's their functionality.
Okay, appreciate that. This is still on page 19, and there's a discussion that also in the footnote there's a description of the zone coverage deployment strategy. Can you just elaborate just briefly on what that involves?
Yes, sir. So at the outset of the discussion about the expansion of this model, which occurred around August of last year, the Department of Sanitation aggressively expanded their operations. They went from roughly 14 teams a day going out 4 days a week to now 30 teams a day going out 5 days a week. In the original model of both Rapid Response and Operation Healthy Streets, a police officer team, usually a HOPE team group or a reset group, was part of that package. Unfortunately, the police department doesn't have the resources to provide that for 30 teams working 5 days a week, with a resource pool of 42 HOPE officers working 4 days a week and 50 reset officers working 4 days a week. So we got together with our collaborative partners, and we determined that the best balance between ensuring the safety of both the community, our homeless neighbors, and the care team operations, and being able to stay within our deployment restrictions, was to go to a zone coverage model where the HOPE teams on a daily basis will take a look at what is scheduled to be cleaned either by CARE or CARE Plus within their bureau, and then assigning HOPE units, 2 officer HOPE units, to zones within that bureau, and their job then would be to respond to any CARE or CARE Plus operation that's occurring within that zone of responsibility. And so that happens 5 days a week, within the boundaries of the city. With the exception, now if you see at the bottom, originally senior lead officers were used in the capacity of going out and providing that security assessment with CARE Plus locations for the first roughly 20 minutes to half an hour of a CARE Plus deployment. But as we saw the success of the zone coverage model being the relatively small number of times that police are requested throughout the city, allowed us to use the HOPE team officers and free up the senior lead officers to go back and doing their primary duties in community resilience building, and then having the HOPE team officers step in and provide that security service. So we've almost eliminated the need for resources outside of Reset and HOPE to be a part of the process.
Okay. And you indicated, by the way, that I believe in your introductory remarks, you indicated that one of the things you do is either attend or participate in some of the daily briefings. Did I understand that correctly?
At the UHRC?
That's what I wanted to know. Is it only at the UHRC, and so you're not out and around, popping in and out of a lot of these briefings? You're at one location, or?
Oh no, so on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I help lead both the morning and the afternoon briefings at the UHRC, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm generally in the field.
And what is that? So you partially answered my question when you said that you help lead, I believe. What does that consist of? I mean, just give me take me for just 30 seconds into one of those briefings.
Sure. In the field.
Yeah, I mean, are you taking information? You giving information? You giving direction? What are you doing?
So I mainly just listen, and I try not to get into the operations. But for example, I was out in Venice on Friday at 3rd and Rose during a CARE Plus operation, and what I saw is that they had a need for Department of Transportation support in shutting down a street. And so I got back to the office, I put in that recommendation, I talked to our DOT counterpoint there, and so this coming Friday they'll have DOT support. So it's just stuff like that. It's saying that it's just place-based.
And you're doing this as a representative of the mayor, in the mayor's office?
Yes, sir. I'm with.
So like in the example you gave, you're able to kind of identify gaps, presumably cut through some red tape, and get people connecting dots and talking more. Is that fair? That
is fair. I'm also a licensed clinician, and so I can bring a therapeutic clinical eye to the outreach work being done as well.
Thank you. Just one more. On the bottom of page 20, there's a discussion of the discussion of the department's role in messaging with the senior lead officers and other. Can you give me a sense of how do you take all of what you've been talking about this morning and what we've seen in the report, and how is that conveyed? Just what is the thumbnail? What is the message? Just generally, how is it conveyed in terms of what the role is? What the department's really trying to achieve.
So the first thing is a reminder to all the senior lead officers about their responsibility as far as messaging. Our senior lead officers are a very visible portion of the department within the public. and how they interact with the public and how they respond to questions. It plays a very big role in the community's perception about what the department is or is not doing and can or cannot do. So we always begin with a discussion about what the expectations are for our senior lead officers as far as that messaging piece. And then we go into the actual discussion of the philosophies. What does it mean to be services-led? If you pull somebody over for speeding and you immediately write them a ticket, that's not an example of services-led. So how do we actually translate those philosophies into actual what are the behaviors? And those behaviors would be, we're asking you to gain voluntary compliance, engage in a conversation with individuals. Yes, the tent might be up during the hours where it's prohibited, but let's engage in that conversation and let's get the voluntary compliance for trying to get that piece down. And if there's persistent issues at particular locations, then what are the environmental aspects that are going into that? Is there some sort of environmental protection, like under a freeway underpass? Is it just happen to be in close proximity of a resource center? Does it happen to be a group of people and somebody in that group is getting familial support, and that is then helping to bolster that entire group, and find out how we can make more permanent connections in that way. I also stress to the senior lead officers that there's a lot of services and service providers that are out there that are beyond the reach of CES or beyond the knowledge of CES that the senior lead officers know. A lot of our faith-based organizations, a lot of our smaller NGOs that don't appear on the CES network are known to our senior lead officers, and the ability to utilize those resources as well as the formalized resources within the organization are also important. And then there's frustration up and down the lines of the official channels to request things and databases, but we have to utilize the tools that we have. And a reminder that the interface between us and the other shared responsibility partners is what is going to make this a success. This can't be a police-led operation for a variety of levels that the chief has discussed and that we've all discussed at these things, and to continue to drive that home. People become senior lead officers because they want to be problem solvers. And sometimes that means jumping out ahead even when you shouldn't be jumping out ahead. And so having those cautionary discussions about what our role is in this humanitarian crisis is the most important thing that I try to impart on them. And then I leave them. Sorry.
And so the report indicates that you've kind of made the first sweep, and that you're scheduling additionally training sessions. Is that and are you going to be circling back to continue the conversation with the senior lead officers?
Yes, sir.
Generally, is this monthly, quarterly, when you can? What is the...
Well, if we can get all 21 areas within the course of a year, I would consider that a success.
So you'll be continuous throughout the year?
Yes, sir.
Throughout the year. Last specific question. On page 21, there's a discussion of the... what I would just refer to as, it sounds a little bit like an amnesty program for warrant citation dismissal. The question is that a one-time amnesty, or is that an indefinite?
This particular program that we discussed is a one-time piece that was negotiated between the chief of police, the district attorney, and the city attorney about a series of warrants that I think we all generally agreed were more burdensome to the individuals that are experiencing homelessness and to the system. And so it would be in everybody's best interest to dismiss. We are still looking at diversion programs, though.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commander, just a few quick questions before we go to public comment. And this is a broad-based question, in part because you were recently here in January on the third quarter report. And I note all of your reports, and for very good reason, compare fourth quarter to fourth quarter, third quarter to third quarter. But I also wonder, and that's for very legitimate reasons, different things happen during the course of the year that impact. But also, I pulled out the third quarter report to take a look to see the changes, and I wonder if there are, if there's value in comparing the annual trend quarter to quarter as well as year to year. And I ask that because when I looked at the HOPE numbers for the third quarter, homeless conducts were over 3,000, and for the fourth quarter, just over 2,000, which seemed a significant difference. And I didn't know whether to put any significant weight on that change or whether that is an annual trend that really doesn't hold much weight. I wonder if you can comment on that.
To the specific question, I
Just
don't have that
generally-
information.
generally.
But we, in fact, just had a conversation this morning about taking a look at not only the quarter to quarter, which is the apples to apples comparison, but also taking a look at more overtime comparisons of the different data sets that we present to you.
Thank you.
Plus, actually taking a look at the data sets and working with the Homeless Committee of the Board of Police Commissioners and determining whether or not this report still meets your needs. And producing a document under the guidance of Chief Arcos that will meet your needs.
I think that would be helpful for all of us, and I'm not saying the report doesn't address a lot of issues. I would like to be sure that it remains contemporary, and it would seem to me, given the day-to-day changes on this issue, that looking at the trends over the course of the year might also be helpful. But not having all the data to that, I can't say for sure, but I appreciate it if you would look at that.
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
we'd find it helpful. Ms. Pfeiffer, I just have not so much a question, but a comment. I know for many years you have worked on victims' rights, and advocacy in that area, and I certainly appreciate you coming today. You're under no obligation. I do have a request for you, though. You talked about free transit passes being available. I think that was the terminology you used. And I would wonder if you might be able to use your influence. I realize you're not in charge of that program, but to
Yes.
see if you could exert a bit of influence on it, to see if there's a way to get those passes to individuals before they get the citations. It seems to me there must be a more efficient way to do that. If they are individuals experiencing homelessness, they're getting a citation because they can't afford it, but there are free passes available.
Sure.
This seems like a bizarre bureaucratic structure that's been created for people who are not able to navigate that bureaucracy.
Sure.
I'm not sure I would want to navigate that bureaucracy. So if you could help figure out a way to get that service more directly available to the people who need it, it seems that that would benefit all.
Sure.
Thank you, I
No problem.
appreciate that. Unless other commissioners have questions, do we have public comment on this item, please?
Yes, we have 10. The first three, Jonathan Foster, Zach Sherwin, and Audrey George.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. This is a great topic. Figueroa is a fraud. If she's not going to show up here, she needs to get out of here.
Sir,
It's just like Terry
sir,
O'Day of the
please-
Santa Monica City
Please
Council.
address the report, sir.
The
Thank you.
report, yeah, this is, the problem is, so much money is going to Israel.
Sir, you're still not on topic.
That is the topic, miss. That's why there's homelessness. Because the billions of dollars are going to another country, and we are putting up settlements. This is where the money is going, miss, to settlements in Israel. They're debating in Congress how to spend the money to put people in homes over there, while in LA we got black people that are dying. It's replaced by a Jew. It says it right here. And let's talk about the LAPD budget problems with the injuries to and the deaths of the police officers without resources when they show up to deal with homeless people. They don't have the resources, do they? We're talking about resources. It's all going to Israel. When is that going to stop? I want it to stop now, because I got a black person's dying, a Latino, another white guy, maybe a Native American. You don't have the resources. This is exceptional circumstances. That's a word from here. What was another one? It's bizarre, isn't it? It's a little bizarre. We're going to give money to that crap over there. Bizarre, aloof, crazy people. That's exceptional circumstances. How about words of engagement? When the police show up, what are the words of engagement? Changes the whole thing. Hi, Madam Speaker. What would the words of engagement change?
Our next speaker, Mr. Sherwin.
Houselessness is such an enormous issue facing our city, and I have to say that that report was deeply unimpressive to me. These answers that, Commissioners, you're getting to your questions strike my ear as jargon-filled bureaucracy, ease, smoke screens, and ass covering. Are you impressed with the answers that you're getting to your questions? To me, it sounds like you're just verbally spinning your wheels. Commissioner Murphy Goldsmith, you asked a question about how LAPD can do a better job of addressing structural racism. And part of the answer included the person giving the report saying, we hope to fade into that position where we belong to part of a chorus that only gets involved when it's necessary. To me, that is word salad, and not only is it an unsatisfying answer to your question, but it's just indicative of this general inability of the LAPD to speak to the way that they're behaving. And I just find it deeply dismaying as a person who's sitting out there listening to it, that this is the kind of report that we're getting on this huge issue. Holding up as, from what I could hear, an impressive statistic that police cause injury in the same proportions with housed and unhoused people, that's not a point of pride as far as I'm concerned. 40% of the time a person experiencing homelessness is injured, that's 15% better than the 55% of non-houseless people. Again, it's not a point of pride. And who are those people who are having those interactions? It's disproportionately poor people and people of color. Some of the numbers in the report, Table 4 indicates a 17,500% increase in releasing unhoused people from custody for fair evasion. What a waste of resources, what unnecessary harassment and trauma. Just for example, Table 5 has its own category, walking outside the crosswalk. Then there's another other section in Table 5. One of the categories in it is walking outside the crosswalk. It's the same category. Again, to say it doesn't inspire confidence is an understatement. Finally, I want to ask the other commissioners if you hear Steve Soboroff saying we and us when apparently referring to LAPD.
Ms. George.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for using pronouns that remind us however egregious it is that you present yourself here as a self-identified representative of LAPD. In effect, this report, just like the others, just shows that you are still engaging in broken windows policing. These quality of life infractions that you charge people for are life-changing for the individuals who you are criminalizing and dehumanizing. For instance, it affects their ability to get housing based on this coordinated entry system that will capture data like that and influence decisions about their eligibility. You cannot, just changing terms like aggressive transient oppression is not enough, any more than you can train officers against implicit bias when you have such a racist system in place. You can't run from the racial disparity that the data shows or spin it otherwise. Meanwhile, LAPD keeps asking for more money all the time from the budget where they get over half of the general fund so that they can, using it to help fight homelessness when they claim not to want to be the first responders, not to want to be involved, but they keep asking for more money. No handcuffs, which seems to be your stated goal, doesn't mean that you're not having an impact. When you burden people with fines and court dates, these are systems that are responsible for deaths of people like Albert Ramon Dorsey, like Victor Valencia, and like John Penny, who was shot and attempted to be murdered by LAPD.
Our next three speakers, please.
Adam Smith, Devon Brown, and Ayman Ahmed.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, Commissioner Goldsmith, it's quite striking how often you thank Chief Moore for his wordage and his verbiage and the criticality of his totality of his words in this room. When you know the impact of the LAPD policies on the ground, you know about Albert Ramon Dorsey and Charlie Africa and Brendan Glenn and now Victor Valencia, you know that the homeless population is 40% black in a city whose population of black people keeps going down. It's 9% or whatever. So to sit in here and thank the chief of police who's saying we shouldn't be the first responders to poverty, if he really believed that, don't you think that maybe he could do something about it? And you're thanking him for his hollow words? I don't know. Just seems like a lot of trash. Mr. Bonner, it's troubling that you had to ask Commander Graham what the CARE program is. I mean, that's instrumental to the way that one of like the many points of contact the LAPD is involved with the houseless population. And it seems to worth noting, I don't know if Commander Graham didn't get the memo, but on the 21st of January, after 5 months, only 5 months of these CARE and CARE Plus programs, they actually shifted what the programs look like. Icing out LASA, now LAPD is being pre-deployed with the CARE and CARE Plus teams, not being, called in if someone gets spit on. What the fuck? They're being pre-deployed back to normal old, yes, they're still called CARE and CARE Plus, but they're being run by the LAPD and the council districts. Complaint-driven, enforcement-led.
Thank you. Devon Brown.
How you doing? 30 billion exactly is going to Israel, and they have a $500 billion gross every year. I'm Devon Brown, an Echo Park resident. I'm living on God's grass in a tent. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It kind of reminds me of Africa when the slave owners came and took us from the land and took all our resources. This is a social warfare tactic, a social engineering, racism, warfare tactic placed on black people and brown people. 1,000 blacks get killed every year. That's 1.5 black men every year. And when we sit down with the commander-in-chief and he tells us we broke the compromise because we leaves our tents up, and he brings about 20 police officers every night to harass us, putting a flashlight in our tent and everything, trying to evict us off the land that God made. I think this is a war on homelessness, war on drugs first. They gave us the war on drugs, drop crack from the helicopter and call us super predators. Now we're super predators, that's drug dealers, that's homeless in Echo Park. Super predators, now we're drug dealers. Now it's the war on homelessness. Now you want to evict people off the land that God made. And then we call on LASA when Ashley just got fired by Mitch O'Farrell. He put a notion for her to get Ashley fired. She works for LASA. She was there standing protesting with us. So where do we go? We all have the same enemy here. That's the so-called elite, New World Order. Putting the guns in all the vaccines and all that and chemtrails in the air to separate us and divide us. Well, we all have one common enemy here. Private prisons, 90% up to capacity to every state. If it's not 90% capacity, the state owes $3 million. So we're all enslaved by the European Queen of England, Ashe.
Aman Ahmed, sir. Not here. Next three speakers, please.
Melina Abdullah.
Oh, excuse me.
Hi. Just want to give it Ashe. That was great from Devon out there. That was great from all of you. I stay currently unhoused up in Echo Park as well. And earlier I heard somebody said that housed residents get just as many citations as unhoused, but I find that difficult to believe when every resident in my camp has a citation for nonsense. Even a 61-year-old teacher, even, every single resident in our camp has a citation. Every night, the LAPD who say they don't want to deal with this, every night at 11 p.m., the LAPD are at our tents. Every single night. Throughout the day, we expect them to come 2 to 3 times. This is no joke. When we look up on that hill, it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like a PTSD war thing. We look up, we see one cop, and we know they're for us. Sure enough, 2 cops come. Sure enough, now we all have citations. This is every single day. And it's weird because before becoming unhoused, I never really experienced racism, or I never really experienced a feeling of being a second-class citizen. But ever since life circumstances put me on the street, these things are very real. When people talk of institutionalized racism, it's very real when I see it in your faces. It's very real when I have to deal with it every day. So I guess that's all I want to say. Yeah.
Mr. Khan.
So there you have it. I mean, I don't even know what else we can say. And I think I'm just really, really even embarrassed for you, Shane, to even ask an organization that embodies structural racism, that lives and breathes structural racism, that is at the foundation of structural racism, that enforces structural racism, that, you know, what do they think about structural racism? The only way to talk to police about structural racism is to abolish them. That's the only way to do that. From Jim Crow to black codes to lantern laws to Warren gang to mass incarceration to exactly what's going on the ground. This is what structural racism is. And however much, you know, these reports, they try to sanitize, and that's exactly what it is. They're trying to sanitize the role of the police. There is stuff in the numbers, and Audrey lifted that, because broken windows policing, Graham is alive and well. You can put a spin on words. You can talk about reset, but Safer Cities Initiative is very much being unleashed. Jaywalking, open container. How many tickets were given in 2006 and 2007? 13,000 tickets, and that still continues. And then we talk about coordinated entry system, which is another fraud, because what do you mean by placement in a shelter? That is not a placement. That is not housing. That is placement in a shelter, and to claim that as placement is a fraud on people as well. So I want to thank my brothers over there for bringing to life exactly what's going on the street, because you know you can't hide the truth.
Thank you, Red Chief Hunt.
Thank you again to Red Chief Hunt. You know, I go to the Union Station and I watch how they give people tickets and stuff like that, and it meant something to me. And because $75 ticket that's costing the city probably $200 or $300 to write to a person that doesn't have a fare. Okay, I'm looking at the numbers and things like that. It doesn't add up. I got like maybe 20 tickets over there. And, you know, they tell me about fare invasion and shit. I got a whole bunch of bullshit. Because if you look at Oakland versus the city of the state of California and you read the case law, you'll find out there's no such thing as fare evasion. But other than that, I'm listening to these people over here at Echo Park saying that the police comes over there and fuck with them every night. For what reason and why? You know, I'm gonna go get me a tent and go to Echo Park and challenge them. You know, everything instead of giving them vouchers and trying to get them off the street. You know, because I know better. The P1s don't know how to de-escalate. The P2s don't know how to de-escalate. I work the streets every night, things like that, watching the police and things like that. You know, they haven't been trained in that area, so we got all this rhetoric going right here, all this talking, all these numbers and things like that, but it's not actual truth and things like that until you guys get out there and go investigate it yourself. You know, these guys don't mean a damn thing to me. I go over to the Union Station, you know, and I just watch them how they pull people out and give them tickets and stuff like that. And here's the bad thing is they can't give nobody a ticket without LAPD being there. So, you know, Metro can't, Metro can't give tickets without MTA there. So, you know, I've been there, and I've been arrested for fare evasion during the broken systems. So I know what these people are talking about, things like that. I know it from the heart. You guys need to get a better system. Yes, Yvonne.
Our final two speakers.
Dr. Melina Abdullah and Tina.
So, I'm glad that you wanted to uplift that data that black people are 9% of the city, but 40% of the houseless population. In fact, at least 40%. It's good that you wanted to uplift that data, but I'm wondering why you're asking the question of how to undo structural racism to the institution that's founded on structural racism. If we think about what policing is, what it was founded to do, it's just really, it doesn't make any logical sense for you to ask them. You have other people who are experts in this room on how do you undo structural racism. We're in the midst of Black History Month. I'm thinking about you asking policing, a policing system that evolves out of slave catching, much like it would have been for an abolitionist to ask the system of slave catching, ask a slave catcher, how do we undo racism, right? You don't ask them. You ask the people who were experiencing the racism. You have two experts who just walked up to the mic and you didn't ask, well, what conditions, what life circumstances brought you into houselessness? How does policing amplify it? Really, because you don't want to know the answer. The answer is the answer that the community has been telling you over and over again. We need to stop spending our money on police and start investing in things like permanent housing. You need to ask experts in the room. You have two people who teach this. What books should I be reading? I'm going to give you some you didn't ask me. But read Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor's Race for Profit, read Manning Marable's How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, and you'll get to some of the answers to your questions. Stop asking the institution that is creating the racism how to end it and start engaging with the people. If nothing else should tell you, the last 4 months should tell you when you talk about a system that stops us at 5 times our population share, that searches us at 4 times the rate of white folks, that puts us on gang databases.
Dr. Abdullah, please wrap up, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
It's always shocking to me that you cut off Dr. Abdullah, because she always has so much insightful wisdom to offer you, and you turn to these hot air reports for your information. It's always shocking. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the hot air in this report and some of what was discussed, namely the establishing of trust relationships, as you spoke on so much. I don't really understand how bloating the surveillance practices that you do around Skid Row does anything to indicate that you have trust for the people who are living in that area. So trust, to my mind, works 2 ways. It's not just that you're trying to get unhoused people to trust you. Clearly, your behavior evidences no trust whatsoever in the communities that you're attempting to serve. And why is there mistrust? Let's not forget the power dynamics that exist when an unhoused person faces a police officer. If you're struggling to hold on to a pair of shoes because they're stolen day after day, because resources are so thin in this city, how are you supposed to trust someone who walks up to you with a gun, who has a full uniform that's pressed, all these buttons all over them, and a taser on their hip? And one more thing, I guess let's talk a little bit about the encampment on the 101 freeway juncture, Chief Moore. You were talking a bit about how you're hoping that the agency takes on that perspective of resource and social programming before enforcement. What is enforcement if not the demand for compliance for displacement? You're displacing people. That's what you're asking people to do. You're showing up to these encampments and you're asking for voluntary compliance. Where are people supposed to go? Where are they supposed to go? There's no housing in the city. We have real estate speculators who are kicking people out, and you guys are contributing to that. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report. Is there a motion to that effect? So moved. Is it second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for the comments. The next item on our agenda is the department's report relative to ethics enforcement. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief. My name is Robert Marino. I'm the Commanding Officer of Professional Standards Bureau. I'm here with Captain Alex Vargas from Special Operations Division, who will give you some highlights, information from the third quarter report.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chief, Commissioners. With me also is Lieutenant Michael Donatoni. He's the Assistant Commanding Officer of SOD, and Detective 2, Teresa Curtis, who's the Acting Officer in charge of the Ethics Enforcement Section. So if I could start on page number 4, the table number 2, EES conducted 29 tests during the third quarter of 2019, and that was 11 integrity tests and 18 complaint intake tests. We experienced a decrease in the amount of integrity tests due to the unfortunate and unforeseen death of one of our EES employees. We had 18 integrity tests in quarter number 1 and then 20 in quarter number 2 of 2019. For officer safety reasons, I canceled field tests for 2 weeks after the employee's death. That, coupled with the funeral arrangements and the services, caused a decrease in the amount of overall tests compared to the first 2 quarters of 2019. And that's because in the first quarter we had 36 overall tests, and then in the second quarter we had 39. So it is a slight decrease. But I am satisfied with the amount of tests because based on the third quarter of 2018, we had 27 tests. That's still an increase of about 2. And overall, our complaint intake tests, which are mostly telephonic, were about the same amount compared to the first 2 quarters of 2019. So I'm satisfied with that number. It's 18 for the third quarter, 18 in the second and the first quarter. So I'm satisfied with that number. We were able to maintain that number there. Of the 11 integrity tests, we had 1 failure during the third quarter. That resulted in a personnel complaint for neglected duty. We had no pass with comments and 4 attempts. In the 18 complaint intake tests, we had no failures, 3 pass with comments, and no attempts. So although we experienced an increase in the amount of pass with comments, we had 1 during the first quarter, none during the second quarter. I didn't see, during analysis, I didn't see any negative patterns or trends for those 3 pass with comments. Those commands were notified of the concerns that we had with the pass with comments, and all 3 employees were provided with training. If we go to page 6, table number 4, those 29 tests did result in 63 misconduct categories being covered. And that's pretty much similar to quarter number 2. We had the same amount. Although we did have a slight decrease in the on-duty and off-duty contacts and the constitutional policing stop tests. We had 4 constitutional policing stops in the third quarter compared to 5 in the second quarter, none in the first quarter. And then the on-duty, off-duty conversions, we had no tests for those in the third quarter. We had 2 in the second and 1 in the first quarter of 2019. But we did see an increase in 2 categories, and that's the main emphasis that we've been putting on since the beginning of this 2019. And that we saw the increase on the constitutional policing seizures. We had 1 test compared to none in the second quarter and none in the first quarter. And in neglected duties, we saw 17 in the third quarter compared to 11 in the second quarter and then 16 in the first quarter. So I'm pleased to announce, though, that compared to 2018, the third quarter, we did see some increase in certain categories. If you look at the constitutional stops, we've had 9 so far this year. We only had 1 in the same period of last year. And in the constitutional searches, we've had 3 this year, only 1 we had last year. Neglected duties, we've had 44 this first 3 quarters compared to only 33 last year. And tests for theft, we've had 6 compared to 2 last year. And discourtesies, 20 compared to only 12 from last year. So I have seen an increase despite the lowering of the numbers during the third quarter. If you look at table number 5, the number of employees tested by rank, they're very similar in percentages to the first and second quarter, although we had a slight decrease in every category because of the number of tests that we've had that are lower in the third quarter compared to the second. And then table number 6, there was a slight decrease in the amount of assignments that were tested for the same reason, for the number of tests that were lowered. And finally, in table number 7, we continue to make a push for referrals from the chain of command requests. We've had 1 this third quarter. It's a number that we're hoping to increase. But if you look at this year, we've had 5 compared to only 2 in 2018. So I continue to bring up the topic when I do command development school for new captains. When I talk to captains one-on-one where we have other issues, I do bring up and I do remind them about the fact that EES is there a resource for them to test their employees. And also I'll be requesting to be able to do a presentation at the next general staff meeting. So I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate that report. I see that we're on the third quarter of 2019, and I realize you're new to this assignment. I would like to get caught up have the fourth quarter and the first quarter of 2020 presented together if possible at the soonest available opportunity that you can pull it together to catch up. And I think that would be beneficial to all of us rather than to be a quarter behind.
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the fourth quarter of 2019, I wonder if you can include in that report the totality of 2019 so we can see on an annual basis
Yes.
what has been done. And I'll be frank that my concern has long been whether the number of tests that are being done is reflective of the goals that EES has, such as to be a sense of omnipresence throughout the department. I've long questioned whether you can achieve that goal, either with the current numbers that we see in these reports. Seeing it on an annual basis might assist further with that.
Yes, ma'am. And just if I may add,
yes.
The fourth quarter report is about a couple weeks away. The third quarter was kicked back a few times, but the fourth quarter, you should have it in a couple weeks.
Okay. And if it could include that annual.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. With that, may I ask my colleagues for questions? Mr. Bonner, do you have any? No questions? No. Thank you. Is there public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one. Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Foster. With respect to this ethics enforcement report, sir.
Thanks, Jonathan Foster. I only had a basic comment. When the officers shoot a person, are they getting blood tested?
Sir, that doesn't have anything to do with
It's
this
ethics,
particular
miss.
report,
Yeah,
sir?
yeah, it has everything to do with the ethics of the ability for an officer to take the life of someone else. The officer needs a blood test.
Understood, sir. This is not a use of force report. You can ask that question at the appropriate time, sir.
Involved when an officer takes the life of someone else, the officer needs a blood test.
Thank you, sir.
That would be ethical.
The recommended action for the board is to, yes.
President, I'm sorry. We have one card that was submitted as you asked me. Do you want me to put it to general comment?
Sorry, is it late or?
Yes, it's late.
If you could add it to the general comment.
Okay.
Then, thank you. The recommended board action is to receive the report and direct the Office of Inspector General to submit an analysis of this report along with any appropriate recommendations to the board. I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 4-0. The next item on the agenda is the expense to reimburse the chief for expenses that we had previously approved a trip for him to take. Questions from the commission? No? Are there public comments on this item?
Jonathan Foster and Adam Smith.
Very well. Mr. Foster, then Mr. Smith.
I do approve, and I watched the video on the Taser company. And my only comment was, can they be sure they make a Taser that cannot kill a person under any condition? That if it finally hits at the 10 feet, 12 feet, and is wide enough and actually is penetrating the nervous system of the suspect and they're shut down, can they make one that does not kill? Because we know that the Taser has killed a few people. That would be my only question. Thanks.
Good morning again. Chief, I was just wondering, on your tour of the Axon headquarters, did you figure out why your recently demoted Detective 1, now Sergeant 1, Colin Langsdale, wasn't able to turn his on before he shot Victor Valencia in the back and let him die on the sidewalk on January 11th in the middle of the day? 'Cause I know it, like, when you turn on the body cam, it rewinds and shows the previous 2 minutes, and that wasn't in the critical incident video that you all edited and narrated. So I'm curious, did he not only not turn it on to show the shooting, but then he waited 2 minutes after the shooting and then turned it on? So yeah, I was just wondering, like, when you were up there at Axon, did you, like, talk to them about maybe why your veteran officer didn't know how to work his fucking camera.
The requested action is to approve the department's report. I'll move that forward. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you. The next item is with respect to donations. Are there questions from commissioners? Mr. Bonner has a couple. Is there someone from the department? Commander?
Good morning, Commander Ronkunis.
Morning.
Morning. Yeah, I had a couple of questions about, one, I observed looks like we're still working through some of the requests from last year with the holiday parties, and I think there was something back from October, so I just encourage everyone to do what you can to kind of bring everything up to date as best we can. The one that I wanted to understand in particular was there's the 48 or 70-something page report, I think, and on page 40 or 28, there's a discussion of the $362.78 for the hard drive for the Force Investigation Division to back up and increase the storage capacity. And the question really is this kind of thing being addressed on this kind of intermittent basis where one part of the department says we're out of critical storage capacity, and so you go out and you're getting a donation to address that? I mean, that strikes me as something that would be addressed on a more systemic, basis across the department. So if you could help me understand really the nature of that request and why it's something we should approve.
So for specifics on that, I know during the budget request we asked for different types of equipment for storage. In this particular case, I would have to respond back to you, sir, to figure out if it was for personal use to store for each individual detective at FID regarding various types of investigation. I believe there's numerous requests put in for USB storage devices, but at some point maybe enough weren't ordered, or that just wasn't calculated correctly in FID's budget account. So that then in turn there has to be a way for detectives as such to store various types of information for their investigations. But I don't have the specifics as you requested, but I can get back to you and obtain that information.
And Commissioner, I'll add that on item number F, that overall endeavor of storing video and data related to categorical uses of force was part. This hard disk was part of a much larger endeavor involving other laptops and displays and capabilities. Why the one item ended up here, we'll follow up as to was this a cleanup in the sense of just accounting for each piece of equipment, and may not have been in an earlier invoice, if you will, that we accepted on behalf of a donation by the foundation.
And what is the comment on the also just, and maybe you answered part of it in terms of is the department addressing storage capacity across the board, so to speak, or is it up to individual units within the department to say, hey, we're running out of capacity? That can't be the case.
No, it's not the latter. It's we take the strategic approach of looking at storage and all of our operational capacities with technology. You may recall that in the last 6 months, we have invested heavily in our ability to develop the critical incident videos and to work cooperatively between Force Investigation Division and our media relations, who are the people who assemble the actual critical incident video. And that back and forth, if you will, involves pre-production, if you will, development of what footage will be provided and how it'll be contextualized for the release. So there's a developing capability within Force Investigation Division and our media information officer, or director, Josh Rubenstein, and his staff. And this last year has involved us investing substantial monies in technology that were not budgeted or provided for in the city budget. So we did have to reach it. We did look to the foundation, and they were able to support that.
So I think my question or concern is probably less about the donation element of it. It's just the specter of at least even the photograph that appeared to be an external hard drive, this particular device that they were requesting. So this just kind of creates the specter of a group of people in the department with an external hard drive on which they're capturing critical video information that may or may not, be secure and integrated into the larger technology enterprise, if you will. So I'd like some more just information about how the information is stored and how the storage capacity issue is addressed, across the department.
Okay.
And lastly, some assurance that with the technology initiative that's underway, will that solve this problem, or will we still have parts of the department looking for external hard drives even after we complete the upgrade?
Well, I think an external hard drive is such a small component of an overall technology initiative, so I will not make assurances that we'll not have peripheral issues that occur in the day-to-day operation of the organization. Our effort is to budget strategically. Our effort is to budget strategically and provide for via the city budget the development of everything we can anticipate. In the city budget, oftentimes falls short of that. And that's where the foundation through this last year and a half has been willing to step into and fill that void. The technology of the advancement of developing the critical incident video ability to respond to that has been a growing capability within Force Investigations and our media relations folks. The effort with the 5-year plan that we now have mapped out for our technology build does have we try to anticipate unanticipatable peripheral small issues that are not of a strategic critical importance, but deal with day-to-day needs of evolving technology. The assurance of security of any system, all the information that we possess is confidential. It is not subject to public disclosure, and we certainly have standing security requirements for the protection of both external drives as well as any other confidential information. And I'll ask Commander John McMahon to sit down and meet with you to brief you relative to our existing requirements.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, because what I'm pointing out again is, and I could be wrong in terms of how the image that was included in the report, but it looked like something that someone could simply walk off with, or it could get lost. This external hard drive is a device that's about 5 inches tall, 3 inches wide or so, plugged into a computer. So it appeared to me that what they were planning to do was to start storing video information about categorical use of forces on a device that someone could simply lose, or could walk off, or could get damaged in somewhere. So I just asking for some added assurance that the image that I took away from the report as was written hopefully is incorrect.
I would again welcome the opportunity for you to sit down with Commander McMahon at your convenience for us to go through our existing security protocols to safeguard such critical information.
Thank you.
Thank you. And while we're at it, might I just ask the Inspector General of an update on the status of the Commission's request to have a review of the donation system?
Yes, as requested by the Commission, we're looking at a number of areas holistically with regard to the donation process.
I'm just asking the timeline. When will we see that report?
We anticipate that coming, I believe, toward the end of the second quarter of this year.
Okay, so somewhere around July?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With that, is there public comment?
Yes, we have one. Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Foster.
Jonathan Foster. It's the same issue with this money that you have to turn to some other organization to get a donation from. And again, as I've said, the GDP of the United States of America is so huge, no one has to work. It's true. No, there's nobody needs to really get up and go to work. I mean, we have needs. We have to serve one another. That's a capacity that's acceptable. Here, this donation process, you've got one for 15 grand, one for 12 grand. I mean, it's just chump change. I mean, the GDP is like $1 trillion or something. And then what did they do? They raised the debt ceiling to like way past God. And I don't know how God can even come up to pay for the debt that we got. And you people are always in a budget problem. And then they yell and scream that so much of the budget's going to payroll and all this kind of stuff. And I agree with them 100% that it's the budget is a problem, but no one ever discusses why the budget is got some completely far unrealistic problems that go on where you constantly have to go to somebody else that has the money, and yet they could just give the money out. That you don't have to. Maybe we wouldn't need cops. You know what I mean? What was the other one I wrote down? It was a personal choices for people when they commit crime. And then you've got to come up with extra money to try to deal with people's personal choices. I have a personal choice problem. I know all well too good. I've got some of the same personal choice problems that you guys have to deal with. But when you're coming for like $15,000 and $12,000, I mean, you shouldn't be asking for money. We should just be rolling in whatever we need. But the money went to Israel.
Madam President, we have one late card.
Okay, please add that to public comment. Thank you. The requested board action is to approve the department's report and accept the donations. It's moved, seconded. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It passes 4-0. The next item on the regular agenda is item E, the destruction of obsolete and duplicate records. Any questions from commissioners on that item? No. Seeing none, are there public comment cards on that item?
No, we do not.
I'll move to approve the department's report. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 4-0. Chief, report of the Chief of Police.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
As I do each week, to talk about significant events. This past week, we had no categorical uses of force. That information remains unchanged from an earlier report. Relative to meetings and activities, on last Thursday, the California Department of Justice Director Jenny Rich and Director Randy Chase traveled to Los Angeles. I met with them after they attended one of our training sessions with our Metropolitan and Gang Enforcement Detail officers. The training session is regarding the expectations and definition of the California Gang database entry requirements, what the 8 various criteria are, and our expectations relative to the level of detail and information and the critical importance of the accuracy of that information. And they met with me afterwards and shared their compliments relative to the quality of the investigation. The quality of the training and its timeliness. I also met with them, and during that conversation spoke about the critical importance of the California Gang database and our reliance upon it, as well as our assurance that the integrity of that information has to be absolute. And it was a good information exchange and conversation. I look forward to continuing to work with the Attorney General and his staff as they announced yesterday his office's intention to conduct its independent review of the information that we have that goes into the California Gang database and its accuracy. On last Wednesday, I had as I do regularly, Chiefs Forum, this one involving our Jewish communities, met at the Jewish Federation with City Attorney Fuhrer in attendance, as well as Councilmember Koretz. We met with a broad range of the Jewish community, both from various communities as well as parts of the Jewish faith, and spoke about interests of concern, but also the various means in which community members can hook into, if you will, information streams relative to emerging threats and patterns of anti-Semitic behavior. We have seen an increase in this region, as this country has, regarding the anti-Semitic hate crimes and instances, and there are many within the Jewish community that are concerned for their safety and the safety of their house of worship. This was a good meeting, and to allow us to remind the various community members of the various means of which they can gain information from us, channels of information relative to threats or instances that occur not only here in this region, but across the country or the world. Following that meeting on this past Saturday, we had our annual Martin Luther King brunch that was hosted in part by generosity of the Police Foundation, as well as the USC, University of Southern California. Our keynote speaker was Dr. Folt. Commissioner Bonner, thank you for attending that session with us, where we celebrated Dr. King's legacy as well as his pursuit of justice. There was a broad range of community and faith leaders that were present, and during the presentations for LAPD's involvement, my remarks centered on our efforts to right a wrong. One of the first of two African-American officers, Robert William Stewart, was appointed in 1889. And with his appointment, he served faithfully in the downtown area of Los Angeles until an arrest occurred of him in 1900 where he was accused of a sexual assault. He later went to trial, but prior to that trial, he was actually fired by the department, which was an actual violation of our existing rules at the time. The initial trial of him resulted in a hung jury 7-5 for acquittal. On his retry, he was found innocent and not guilty on all charges in about a 40-minute deliberation. However, rather than reinstating him, he was never brought back onto the department and went on to become a laborer and janitor here in Los Angeles until his passing in 1931. So my discussion was that in recognizing the effort to build trust and to build faith in a community in an unjust system, that part of that is recognizing when we make errors and we do and the wrong thing happens for the wrong reasons. And so I announced then, and I'll say here, that our effort will be to reinstate him in his legacy and to retire him in good standing. Officer Stewart had a son that we have not been able to identify any heirs from him. And so we don't believe there's any surviving members of Mr. Stewart, but that we'll continue to look into that area. And then also was able to join Commissioner Bonner in his remarks relative to our history.
We have commissioners who are saying they can't hear the presentation. Members of the public, please refrain from comments and noise. Thank you.
The following day was our 2020 celebration of African American Heritage Month. It was co-sponsored by First AME Church as well as Mayor Garcetti, honoring a number of black leaders throughout this region. We're pleased to have U.S. Senator Kamala Harris appear, and she made her remarks, as did Mayor Garcetti and others. It was a good celebration, and we enjoyed that service. Yesterday, we had our public occasion of announcing the reopening of the Harbor Jail. That will actually open formally at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, this next Sunday. And that concludes my remarks as far as events over this past week. Briefly, I'll go into our crime picture. We now have completed our first full month of crime statistics for the year. We continue to have a reduction in violent crime and overall Part 1 crime. We have seen an increase in homicides. We remain at 27 homicides this year versus 20 last year. However, our shooting violence is actually down with 2 fewer shooting victims. So we'll continue to monitor this situation to see if there is any focus or any patterns or trends that are being developing with this most recent spat, if you will, of these homicides. Regarding in-custody deaths, we remain at 1 in-custody death with no change versus 0 last year, and we remain at 2 officer-involved shootings, no change from my report last year. I'm sorry, my report last week, and again, last year at this time we had 0 officer-involved shootings, and our 4-year average is just over 4 at this point. Regarding traffic collisions, in the first month, I am pleased to say that there's been an overall reduction in serious injury and death collisions, as well as a reduction in DUI-related collisions and hit-and-run collisions, as well as motor vehicle versus ped and cyclists. So the month of January compared to the same period last year, we have had a good start. I did meet yesterday with members of the safe bicycling community and as well as the pedestrian safety community, and with Deputy Chief Chow and members of the traffic safety efforts of the department, and we'll be working with them more closely in some education and development of a campaign to help improve the safety of pedestrians, not just here in the downtown area, but across the city. Regarding our sworn civilian personnel status, we are at 10,056 total sworn police officers within the organization, 3,020, civilian personnel, 387, reserve officers, and 1,724 cadets. And that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Bonner.
Thank you. Chief, I wanted to go back to, you mentioned the brunch and the reinstatement of Officer Stewart, and I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about a conversation that we've recently started, and it ties to the to some degree to the department's strategic plan that has a lot to say about the department's efforts to build trust with the communities. And as you know, at least my view, and it's one that I'm aware now that you share, that an important part of that effort is to make sure that we have a more full and balanced accounting of some of the department's history, and in particular some of the major historical events that have had a dramatic impact on the department, negative impact on the department's history with some communities and communities of color in particular. So first, I wanted to I was not aware that you were going to make the honor of Officer Stewart on Saturday, so I appreciated that. But I wanted you to comment briefly, because I've gotten the impression just that there's already some people who are involved in this effort that you've taken up the charge, I guess is what I'm saying, in a way that I am pleased with. But I wanted to know a little bit more in terms of who in your staff is really involved and the current thinking along those lines. But my hope is that sometime in this first quarter that we'll actually be in a position to comment more specifically to the commission as to what your thoughts are in that regard, because it relates not only to just the recounting of the history, but I think what we've been talking about is the importance of making sure that current and future officers understand not only the history, but how it informs the thinking and the relationship with communities today, given that some of the people who were involved in some key incidents are still very much alive in some communities. So I would hope that the plan includes not only an effort to inside the department, but to include broad participation of the public, so that it's not an effort of the department simply retelling a history, but that it's something that the community can participate in as well. So I'd appreciate just a couple of comments on where you are on that, and in particular, again, my hope is that sometime later in the first quarter that you'll be in some position to give us a more substantive comment on where it is and where it's going.
So thank you, Commissioner. I'm happy to. As you mentioned on Saturday, and I echoed a bit, as we move into 2020, we had an opportunity in looking at our 150th year to celebrate and recognize milestones that the department achieved, but also in many of our presentations talked about some of the darker moments and some of the issues of where injustices occurred at the hand of the organization. And in doing that, I believe in our conversations between you and I, a fair observation was made, which was in regards to our external website, how balanced is the information on that website relative to a better detail or a more accurate detail of both triumphs as well as ghosts or darker moments. And we are endeavoring this year in 2020 to update and in doing so, ensure that the history that is contained in there relative to the department history is more balanced, and it's more reflective and fair, and that we listen and acknowledge our critics as well as those that would praise or call out our accomplishments. Secondly, is that the department, as was identified in the 21st Century Policing Report by then President Obama, has had an ongoing effort with community advocates to inform its training, both its recruit basic training as well as in-service training, that it be reflective of a variety of voices throughout the community, whether it be by race or gender, race or gender primarily, sexual orientation, and immigration status, and those types of areas, and again, that our training would be reflective in the sense of a procedural justice standpoint of have we always been fair, have we always been forthcoming with our actions in the manner in which we've delivered police services. And as we started looking at it renewed under the guidance of Assistant Chief Tobias Grimala and Deputy Chief Martin Baeza and Dr. Luann Pinnell, and surveying the systems that we have and delivering these trainings, found that I think we have an opportunity here to go back and renew our investment, broaden our community advocacy panel of stakeholders from throughout Los Angeles of varying advocacies, and invite them into a conversation of reviewing our training, recruit basic training, the development of our professional development of our personnel, as well as the in-service nature of that, and also participate as panel members so that as we are developing young people, young officers into this profession, they can hear firsthand from people who have experienced the department's work in a negative fashion, and one that has not been necessarily helpful, and in many instances hurtful, and understand the perceptions and how the biases that are believed that we're engaged in may have nothing to do with the officer there, but does represent the uniform, and is brought into that conversation by the uniform the officer is wearing and the actions of a department over the last 150 years. So in this engagement, I would look to an opportunity to bring Assistant Chief Grimala and her staff to this body, and to make a presentation, and to include members that we've identified to date of individuals from the community who are invested in this effort as well. This is something that we want to be thoughtful about, and we expect that there'll be voices around the table that will have varying degrees of interest in this, and also they may even debate each other as to what's relevant today for our people to be aware of. But I welcome, and I know my senior staff welcomes the opportunity to ensure that our work in training and development of our people sets our people up for the best opportunity to understand the communities in which they're working in, and how they're being received is impacted by our past. Lastly, we have an initiative that has stalled for more than a decade, where 21 areas of the city, these 21 commands, have existed in nearly our entire history. And in those commands, there are reflections of instances, both positive and negative, that members of those communities still are very much aware of. And are we developing opportunities for when people transfer to those areas, our personnel, for them to have a primer and an understanding of where are the locations that served as, again, points of success, but also points of failure or criticism or erosion of trust that we were a part of. And so this is an endeavor that I believe, as we talk about procedural justice and we talk about serving in a manner that builds trust, part of that is internally understanding the perceptions and beliefs externally, and understanding that, I think, is best informed by having a clearer understanding of what history is actually, how it's influencing those perceptions and those beliefs that an officer who may have lived his entire life or her entire life in Los Angeles, but in a portion of it that they're unexposed to these instances. And so this is an effort, I think, to better prepare our officers and to reinforce the fact that tomorrow, as we make history, we need to be informed of our history to have the best chance of being successful.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to again emphasize that I'll work with Chief Grimala, right, to understand what that conversation is, because I want others to understand what it is, and I want the city to be aware, so that those who may not be on the radar screen, who have important or can be an important part of that conversation, and then also to emphasize that I think you said this, but it's not simply something that is going to be addressed in training on the front end of one's career, but presumably we're going to build a mechanism that will continuously inform officers of major historical events that have relevance to the mentality of the current communities, but also hopefully will improve the operational behavior of departments or the department personnel as well.
Yes.
Right. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Chief, if I could turn to your comments regarding the CalGang database, and to the extent you can state publicly, I wonder if you can comment further on actions you're taking. As we know, the Attorney General indicated through a correspondence yesterday about investigation that they will be undertaking to ensure the integrity of the data placed into that system. Obviously, the Inspector General, we previously charged with doing an independent investigation as well. And of course, we welcome any findings by the Attorney General as to actions this board may be interested in taking as well. But I know you are very engaged in this issue, and I wonder what else you can state publicly about the actions you are taking immediately while these investigations are going on, or are you waiting for your own internal investigation to be complete?
No, I don't think the integrity of this system and its criticality and the necessity that the information be entered is accurate and relevant to the purpose of the database. It requires that we have begun initiating changes to all the system that are already in place, are already ongoing. One of the issues was for us to follow up on advice and counsel that we gave to the Attorney General back in August, was for us to formalize the revised and narrowed criteria for what constitutes information that is subject to being entered in the California Gang Database. Secondly, was to institute supervisory oversight to include that gang supervisors would review body-worn video of the officer who completes a field interview card that would be information that would be entered into the California Gang Database, that be a review so that we can ensure that the information is accurate and complete and relevant for entry. Additionally, we have instituted added layers of review so that instances in which an individual who believes they were wrongly entered into the California Gang Database, as they fill out a petition or a request for that they be removed, that would no longer be reviewed solely at the area level, but that would go into the Geographic Bureau at a Deputy Chief Commander Staff Officer level for the facts and circumstances that warrant the individual to continue to be placed there based on information that we have, or for their information to be removed based on a lack of evidence or supporting documentation of the necessity for this person to be entry there. We'll also be implementing a oversight within Detective Bureau as a collection basin for all such requests. This is important to us because as the Attorney General reports from 2018 identified 15 instances in which requests to be removed from the database were made, and that 0 by LAPD were granted. That does not marry up to the information that we have. And so when we looked just most recently at why there's that discrepancy, we're finding that the earlier standards did not require a central clearinghouse, if you will, for this information. So this is a system that is in the process of adding safeguards and adding additional controls and requirements and oversight to ensure that the integrity of the system of the California Gang Database is protected and maintained, and that we are a responsible user of that system. In addition to that is with these changes, obviously there must be training. These things are not just edicts. These are requirements that we provide our officers and supervisors with the understanding of what the requirements are and our expectations of how they operate within their day-to-day activities. So that training began last week, a series of sessions, and it continues. I believe the Office of Inspector General monitored that training, as did the Attorney General's office. I've spoken with Chief Medrano from the California State Attorney General's Office, Department of Justice, as well as the Attorney General himself. And while the efforts at the direction of this Board of Police Commissioners with the Inspector General is understood, and while I've previously spoken about our review of Metropolitan Division's entries into Cal Gangs, as well as the now regular monitoring of any new entries by gang details across the city, I believe that the efforts of the Attorney General will add yet another layer of oversight, of governance, if you will, to demonstrate and ensure the accuracy of the information that is in the California Gang Database, as well as the integrity of the system.
Thank you, Chief. I know on January 14th, this commission charged the Inspector General with a number of areas for review. And obviously, I believe I speak on behalf of all the commissioners. We want you to cooperate, Mr. Inspector General, with any requests made by the Attorney General's office with regard. Also, at the January meeting, under the guidance or suggestion of Commissioner Goldsmith, she requested we have a hearing on the CalGang database. My understanding is that it's now being scheduled for March 24th. Is that correct, sir? Okay. So we'll proceed with that now that it's been organized. Thank you, Commissioner, for organizing that. Any other questions for the Chief of Police? All right, we'll turn to, oh, sorry, sir.
Actually, it may be a question for Commissioner Goldsmith, but either one of the issues that that I wanted to make sure we included in that discussion was an understanding of the impact of being in the database, whether warranted or unwarranted. So I wanted to make sure that that was going to be within the scope of what you're putting together.
Yes, that is my goal for having the hearing. That's the main thing that I'm interested in. So we have invited 5 community organizations whose members have been directly impacted by the gang database and who bring that rich expertise and experience to the table to present. So that's Stop LAPD Spying, Urban Peace Institute, Push LA Coalition, Youth Justice Coalition, and ACLU. Thank you. And if there are any other suggestions for experts who should share their perspectives at that hearing, I certainly welcome them. I'm sure we all do. And I hope that in addition to the presenters who come, that others will come and public comment who have been impacted by the gang database and share their perspectives so we can have a deeper understanding of the impact that it's having. And of course, as a commissioner, you should feel free to inform the agenda and the process.
Furthermore, I'd request Mr. Teefank, if you could open a email account to which written correspondence could be submitted if people are not able to attend that hearing and they want to submit a written comment or a letter to the commission, that we could accept it for purposes of that hearing and close it by the hearing date. Thank you. With that, any other questions, comments from commissioners? Let's move to public comment then. Are there public comment cards?
Yes, we have 8. Jonathan Foster, Paula Miner, and Tabitha Jolivet.
Words of engagement. Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. Hi, Council. Good morning. You've had 98% excellent service and it's still 2% gross. It's really gross. But I'm still going along with 98% excellent service, except for the 2% of what it's connected to is crazy. We had a good week, another one. God bless this week. I wish we had, every week was like this. And it still comes down to personal choices of the conduct of the people within the city of Los Angeles. What is their personal choice to get wrapped up in a charge? But I also find myself in the same problem. Again, I witnessed the police department down in the monster drinks with the sugar and the candy, and then they're going to get into an engagement with somebody. And this is why I said they need a blood test. I need to know how much monster drink they might be on. I saw you yawning. Do you not get 9 to 11 hours of sleep? You should. MLK was shot. Queen Elizabeth gave the order. Did you know that?
The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation.
Yep. And I'd like to see a LAPD chief, Regina Scott, a black female. I wish we could have her tomorrow. About 30 seconds. Being mean to a Jew is wrong. It'll get you put in hell. However, helping them build a third temple is wrong. Witnessing Jesus to them is right. But a bull can't represent you. Can't represent you. APAC, American Israeli Political Action
that the
Committee.
Chief addressed in his report,
Well,
sir.
that's what the problem is. I keep trying to tell you what the problem is, and you keep cutting me
Sir,
off.
I need you to
like
stay
I'm
on
not telling you
topic.
what the problem is.
Mr. Foster, I need you to stay on the topic, which right now is the Chief's
The
report.
problem is Israel, Miss.
Ms. Miner?
Yeah, Chief Moore, we are certainly supportive of the Attorney General's decision to do more oversight or to do oversight on LAPD's use of the gang database. We appreciate that he had the press conference, and we appreciate that he answered the request of community organizations like Black Lives Matter, we wrote to the Attorney General and asked for further investigation. We also sent letters to the Department of Justice. So Black Lives Matter and a number of other organizations, your action, actually, you talk about what you do in the community. This particular issue has really brought different organizations in the community together so that we have been putting pressure on the Attorney General. And I'd just like to say the regulations for the gang database are not yet finalized by the Department of Justice, and we will continue to have input on them. They plan that they'll be finalized by the summer, so I think you need to make sure that this commission knows what's going on and knows what input you make as it's made during that time. And we also support what's said in Assembly Bill 90 that gives the Department of Justice now the supervision, the oversight of the statewide gang database, especially because most of the statistics in the gang database come from LAPD. So it means the whole state's information is distorted by our corruption here in LA. And this is just, you know, everybody kind of talks about it in low tones, but this is unconscionable. This is horrible. So we have thousands of people whose names are in that database that should not be in there. So AB 90 says that the Department of Justice, under the Attorney General, can take some additional actions, and we are recommending that AB 90 authorizes suspension or revocation of LAPD's access to this database.
The next two speakers.
Tabitha Jolivet, Jacqueline Richardson, followed by Reverend Reggie Bunch.
I just want to echo what Mama Paula Minor has just said about the egregious nature of falsifying records and deploying those falsified records in a gang database that wreaks havoc on the communities that you, on the one hand, say you care about, but we know, again, your actions actually tell us what you really believe, because your actions show the complete opposite. So if you want to start talking about righting wrongs, Chief Moore, during Black History Month, not African American Heritage Month, but Black History Month, you can begin by firing the officers who murdered Grishario Mack. How many months has it been since this commission made a decision that those officers were out of policy, and yet you failed to find those officers accountable? So you can go back to 1900, or you can start with 2020. And right that wrong, because there are living family members who are watching you and community members who are watching you. The second thing you can do, since you're looking for things to do during Black History Month, is you can fire the officers who killed Albert Ramon Dorsey, who were also found out of policy. So instead of going back to 1900 to reinstate a Black police officer who was wronged, you might simply focus on what is in front of you. The third thing you might do is cease the use of these databases, and we simply want to echo our support for the Attorney General in providing oversight and auditing what we know to be falsified records. And then finally, what we'd like to ask is, in fact, we're demanding that you release the names of those officers who are responsible for falsely entering names into the database in the first place. Who are they? If you're committed to ensuring police accountability, then tell us their names. That's what you can do for Black History Month. Say it with me. Black History Month, not African American history.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson? Good morning, ma'am. Please begin, Ms. Richardson. Thank you.
Do you mind stopping the clock? If you don't mind, I have something to say. He's passing out a paper for me.
Very
so
well.
that you can understand what I'm going to say.
Given Ms. Richardson hasn't spoken all day, please restart the clock at 2 minutes. Ma'am, go ahead. But now you need to start, ma'am, okay?
Thank you very much. Someone had warned me people doing when I'm saying these things could get killed. These are all rumors. Nothing has been substantiated. Some of the Russian people, if you ask them if this is true, they say, yes, it's true. I've been told that all over the Los Angeles, it's a rumor, 50% or more of the population is from Russia or Russian. All over Los Angeles, and then they said all over, whatever all over means, I don't know if they mean Los Angeles County, California, or the United States. I have a feeling sometimes that it's the United States. They work here, they vote, they may not pay taxes, they may not have IDs to show where they're from. In other words, they're undocumented. Housing. The rumors are we have many large buildings here, brand new and other. The rumors are that most of these buildings are empty. We get the impression that they're full, but they say they're empty. They have people running in and out of these buildings like they're full, but that's a deception. They're running to make it look like they're full. This is a rumor, and these are rumors in Washington and Sacramento. The Democrats probably don't know anything about it. The paper that you have shows the rent the Russian people pay. The first is the first number. That's how much they say the whites pay. The second is how much they charge per month. The second group is how much they charge per month. You have 3 numbers there. Divide those numbers by 4, and that's what they're rumored to pay. Divide that, the third group down, divide that by 4, and that's what they're supposed to pay per month. I don't understand that, but those are the rumors, and they're rumors. I believe they're true, but I can't prove it, so they're rumors.
Thank you, ma'am. Reverend Bunch?
Dr. King said the time to do what is right is always. So if it's right to exonerate the black police officer in 1900, I think it's also right to fire those police officers who murdered Rashario Mack in 2018. Right. And those officers, Martin Robles and Officer Lee, are still on your police department who have murdered black people. And so when are you going to do what is right for those families? Those families who are sitting in grief year after year, and then maybe sometime in 3010, some asshole like you might sit up here and say, well, we're going to exonerate or prime justice for those officers that posthumously. I think it's a slap in the face, everything that you do as a chief of police. I think you are a joke. I hope your whole regime gets shot down the toilet of history. Because everything you have done so far is a slap in the face of any type of progressive change in the Los Angeles Police Department. LA it has the most murderous police department in the entire country. In the entire country. And you have done nothing to roll back those statistics. And I hope that this Attorney General, and we have done this over and over again, Attorney Generals have come in here, FBI has come in here, but you have found a way to fool people like Linda Fairstein and this Smurf-looking fool like Tefank, and this asshole like Soborov, because you know they're all bought out. And I see, what's that child's name? Figueroa Villa, the one that the mayor done paid out millions of dollars. You all are the very definition of corruption. Yes, you, Linda Fairstein, with your prosecuting history, okay? You are part of this continual cover-up and nothing to do about change in this country. And I hope you all fucking realize that, because you're pieces of shit reverberating and keep saying pieces of shit.
Adam Smith, Hamid Khan, and Melina Abdullah.
I know that Mama Paula and Tabitha brought up Rashario Mack and Albert Ramon Dorsey. But yeah, as you bring up something that's 120 years old that you're trying to correct, I am thinking about what happens nowadays, what happens every day in your department. The officers being credibly accused and arrested for rape. The officers being credibly accused and arrested for stealing from people that they are arresting. the murders, the Kenneth French, the Victor Valencia. I mean, Josh Rubenstein is here. You literally have a department to make videos to justify shooting unarmed schizophrenic people in the back. So, I don't know, in 120 years, is Chief Automaton of the LAPD going to think back and be like, well, we kept murdering people, that was bad. You said earlier that you don't want to be the first responder to, yeah. Man, that's fucked up, bud. You said that your department doesn't, well, you don't want me swearing in front of my son. You're literally out here killing people. You're going to shake your head when I say fuck in front of my 4-year-old? Come on. You don't want to be the first responders to houselessness. The Palms Neighborhood Council passed motions last week giving you suggestions in the wake of the killing of Victor Valencia. More neighborhood social workers, LAPD out of sweeps. LAPD as not responders to incidents of mental health crisis. If you actually cared, you could direct funds. You could say that we don't want to be responding to mental health. We need social workers on the street, not people with guns. But you're never going to say that. You don't say that.
So as today's LA Times story talks about the AG opening an investigation into the gang database, the spin is on. So here's something that Horace Frank, I don't know if Horace Frank is here, I mean the guy who lies about drones and suspicious activity reporting program, and says that when it says department officials have said there are no incentive for officers to complete more field interview cards. Make that point, Mark Smith. And then it says, there's no target number, said Assistant Chief Horace Frank. There's no incentive for anyone to breach the law. What the fuck was going on with the laser program? Their own Inspector General comes out and says that they were absolutely incentivizing to manufacture reasonable suspicion, to stop people, to file FI cards, to put people into these databases. I mean, and that program has been dismantled. So, as we talk about this investigation, there needs to be a much more thorough investigation to be done of the spin and the lies that consistently get thrown at us, right? Remember the misclassification of crime reports? Remember the breaking of the antennas from the patrol cars? I mean, on and on and on. So that's basically what we are looking at. But I want to talk about something else as well, more, because we sent a letter yesterday to you and a copy to the commissioners as well. I don't know, Mr. Teefank, if you were able to send it out. This is about a public records request that we filed back on September 3rd, right? And we have had 8 due date changes. 8 due date changes up until now. So let me tell you that we've already won 2 CIPRA lawsuits against the department. So if you want to pay more attorney fees, we're going to file another lawsuit. So from September 3rd, it changed to 9/16, then 9/30, then 10/28, then 11/25, then 12/23, then 1/6, and 2/6, and now April 2nd. So this is exactly what we are doing, that we have filed for public records, and this whole delay and due date and all of this bullshit continues to happen, because that's what we have no other recourse but to file another lawsuit.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
So give us a goddamn firm date and send
Thank you,
the
Mr. Khan. Chief, we did receive a letter. I think all the commissioners did, and I'd ask you to personally look into that and report back to us on the status of that. It does seem like it's taking a disproportionate amount of time to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final speaker on this item is Dr. Melina Abdullah.
So I'd like to echo much of what's already been said, that in the name of Grishario Mack, if you want to celebrate Black History Month, fire the officers who murdered him. If you want to celebrate Black History Month, fire the officers who murdered Albert Ramon Dorsey. If you want to celebrate Black History Month, listen to Black community organizers when they tell you that they want you to do 3 things: end Metro Division, end the use of databases, and release the names of the officers who commit crimes upon our communities. We also want to remind you that Black history also dictates Black futures. We look to our ancestors and the work of our ancestors, the work of those names that we can call, but you should not ever let come out of your mouth. You don't deserve the right to utter the name of Martin Luther King when you don't have any idea who Martin Luther King was. You have no idea that Martin Luther King was arrested 40 times. You have no idea that it's your very institution that stole his life. So you don't have the right to utter the names of our ancestors, but we do. And we honor their memory. We honor their lives by sitting in this room today, by standing up and standing for our people right now. And as you all tell us things like be quiet and you're over time, and as you listen to the police give you recommendations for ending systemic racism, you're showing us what side of history you are on, and it's the wrong side. So Black History Month tells us that we have to be loud, that we have to stand up, that we have to continue to make demands. Black History Month tells us to keep saying the names of our peoples whose bodies are stolen by institutions. Black History Month tells us, don't ever be afraid of these fools. Always remember to stand up for our people. And so we honor Black History Month as something that we do every single day. Ashe.
We'll move on to public comment. How many cards are there on this item?
We have 6 speakers: Jonathan Foster, Jennifer Young, and Reverend Reggie Bunch.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster again. Now, on this one,
situations that we look at now, there's a, boy, we wish we would have had this in this case and that case. I mean, I think of the shooting that happened in the mall.
did you know there wasn't a shooting at the mall? There was a murder. He was walking around with a knife. So, just, I understand that you could forget, Mr. Soboroff. What I don't like is that you didn't stop and ask to remember what his name was. You forget, I do too. But I tried to get his name. You didn't. That's the difference. The APAC is partly what we're dealing with here. Why we have to have all of this negative stuff that we all have to deal with when the money is just going out the window to over there. In so many ways, I can't even, it hurts to see this happening, only for one group of people against separation of church and state. It's double-minded. In the Proverbs, it talks about the double mind. And so it's all wrong. Such hatred of the USA in the hearts of these people, which favor themselves over others, is racist.
Sir, I'm not sure where you're going with this. It has to be something
Of course,
within the jurisdiction
somebody like
of
you
the
wouldn't
LAPD.
realize this, but even in the black Jews in Jerusalem, they don't.
Sir, you're not
they're
talking
getting
about
pushed out too
anything
because
within our
they're black.
jurisdiction.
If you're Christian, you're not going to be able to live in Jerusalem. You know this stuff, or are you stupid?
Sir, this is not a matter before
Are you
this
stupid?
commission. This is not a matter
You know
before
this.
commission.
You're
sir.
stupid. You're a
Sir,
you're a jerk. You're gonna burn in hell
Our
too.
next
Then.
speaker, I'm sorry, I didn't get the name. Was it
Jennifer Young.
Jennifer Young?
Reverend Reggie Bunch is next. After Reggie.
Reverend Bunch? Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
Jennifer.
ma'am, are you? Oh, okay. Are you Ms. Young?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Mr. Young, his health is not.
Please take the microphone, ma'am, and begin the time.
So he could not come today, and.
Please come to the microphone then and speak up.
Okay. So when I first came here, I was kind of so excited to see so many high-rank people from police department. So I called everybody Your Majesty. And today I want to say Good morning, Your Majesties again. But that doesn't mean I will wrap up my report. So, Ms. President Decker, we gave you the document about Sergeant of Trap Division Joe Tellis and his 12 detectives. They made the fraudulent investigation submitted to DA office, Mr. Chief Moore. And so where do I stand with the report of police's 12 detectives' misconduct? Where do I stand with that?
Ma'am, I recall you being here previously. I recall the Inspector General's office, and I think the chief assigned somebody to assist you. I would ask that you speak to those individuals. They would have firsthand knowledge. I'm going to ask the Inspector General, can you refer this woman to your staff member and get her the information she's seeking?
Absolutely.
Thank
We
you.
have folks here in the room. I know we've spoken with you before. We'd be happy to give you an update on what's going on so far. We have staff here in the back of the room if you'd like to meet with them. You can raise your hand.
The staff
please.
member, okay. Ma'am, that gentleman right there is going to assist you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. But your people, they didn't do the work. I want to make sure I'm not here to report the auto fraud. I'm here to tell everybody, the community, that the detectives of your department, Mr. Moore, their misconducts, the 12 of them together. If I hear just now about the shooting, that's hard to decide who is the wrong party. But for that black and white, the documents, the detectives, they do that. That's just threatening of the safety of the community.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, and who are our final three speakers on this item?
Reverend Bunch,
I think what Ms. Young was doing.
Excuse me, sir.
Was lifting up.
Sir, I understand.
Not just the words, but the frustration that this police department puts on the community day in day, and new folks keep showing up. I hope Ms. Young keeps on showing up. And I wanted to lift up back again the shooting of Grishario Mack. Because what Chief Moore did in San Pedro was so disgusting. He took the death of Kobe Bryant and covered up the death of Victor Valencia. He deliberately did that. He's an intelligent, educated man, so he knew how he wrote that little remark for those people in San Pedro. And on the heels of Black History Month, building another jail, when in the history of black folks, jails have been nothing but the institution that's been oppressing us. As a matter of fact, scholars after scholars have shown how prison system is the next phase of the institution of slavery. And so, Chief Moore, I say it again, and to Linda Fairstein, who we know was a Democrat and a reformer, set in reformer seats, trying to make reformer decisions, made the worst decisions for black people. You all are a shameful bunch. You have no shame. You sit here like to think, smiling at folks, not recognizing the frustration that has been generated from this space, meeting after meeting, because you fail to do anything for the community. You all are sickening. And I know you retired with a $1.27 million pension after your last job. So you probably really don't care. And that's why I speak so harshly to you all. Because I know you don't even think the day after what your remarks mean for the community.
Thank you, sir. Who are our final three speakers, please?
Iman Ahmed, Devon Brown, and Zach Sherwin.
And Zach Sherwin. Thank you. Sir, your time is up, sir. Sir, your time is up, sir. There are other speakers waiting to be heard. Sir, please have a seat. Sir, please have a seat. Sir, please have a seat. There are other people waiting to speak. If you don't sit down, I'll have to have you excused from the meeting so that we can hear from other people who are waiting to speak, sir. Thank you, sir. You need to be excused from this meeting. Thank you, sir. You need to leave the meeting, sir. Sir, you're excused from the meeting, sir. Sir, there are other people waiting to speak. There are other people waiting to speak. Sir, sir, I've asked you many times to have a seat. Sir, you now need to leave the meeting, sir. You're interfering with other people's right to speak. Sir, you need to leave the meeting, sir. There are other people waiting to speak. Sir, there are other people waiting to speak. Sir, please leave the meeting. Sir, you're now excused from the meeting, sir. Please. There are other people. There are other people. Thank you, sir. The next speaker, Amana Men, Devon Brown, and Zach Sherwin. Thank you. Yes.
I stand by everything he said, and it's absolutely true that how can you build a jail in Black History Month and assume that you care when a jail are for-profit prisons? You see, I just experienced something for the first time with officers in a jail. I've just been arrested for the first time in my life due to what I consider to be unconstitutional selective enforcement. I was smoking marijuana unhoused in my tent. We're in California. Marijuana is okay to smoke. I'm in a park where a lot of people are smoking, drinking, various people, you know, white girls in a sorority with their open cans and whatnot. Yet the police, 4 squad cars deep, come up to me for a marijuana infraction, which is nothing more than a misdemeanor. Then I have to go in the squad car to Van Nuys, spend a day in Van Nuys, and you can just tell people don't care. This is just their job. They're just in Van Nuys doing their job. I could have been lost for 10 years. Then I go to the court before coming here, and some weird legal jargon, and I have a new court date to go to. This is taking up my life. You know, earlier, Chief Moore said that there's about 10,000 police in the city of LA. There's roughly 60,000 unhoused. So how can you enforce anything to the unhoused without it being selective enforcement, without it being unconstitutional, without you choosing who you're going to attack? You come to one encampment because maybe the speakers in the encampment are standing up for their rights, tell them to put their tents down, but yet you go across the street and all the encampments have their tents up. It's because you cannot enforce certain laws. Thus, these laws are unconstitutional and they get in the way of my rights. And I stand by everything that's been being said here today. That man spoke for us right there. I'm with him. Black Lives Matter. All lives matter.
Thank you. The next speaker, I'm sorry.
Devon Brown.
Devon Brown.
Yeah, building a jail in 2020 is not a celebration. It's actually dissension and carrying on the narratives and notions put on us by slave owners. And let's just cut to the chase here. We know y'all killing black people for our body parts. It's worth trillions of dollars. They're killing black people for body parts and selling them like they did Henrietta Lacks for her cells and put it in medicine in these big pharmaceutical companies. And white people get diseases too. But where did the diseases come from? Diseases coming from the New World Order. Placed on all of us. We're all being used as pawns to kill each other off. The population, so the rich can stay rich and the poor can stay poor. And homelessness is actually a business. False nonprofits, all those billions of dollars and all that, these celebrities that don't give a fuck about us either, they put into these false nonprofits and the government is profiting off of that, trying to govern our mental. I say just leave us alone. We built Black Wall Street, you bombed it. We built hip-hop, which was a praise to God Most High. You took it and demonized it and used it for us to crystallize our realities, to be in negativity and fill up your prison to 90% capacity before you will be fined $3 million. I just say leave us alone, we'll be all right. Let us build our own government, separation over segregation. And how many people y'all gotta kill? Malcolm, Martin, Kennedy, Marley, Nipsey, Sabi, Lawrence character. How many? And I say, from Echo Park, we demand a meeting with Mitchell O'Farrell. And I say, we want to file a lawsuit. Homeless people in Echo Park against whoever the fuck want to get us out of there.
Mr. Sherwin.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the experience of being at these meetings a little bit.
coming week after week, I think it's easy for myself to kind of get numb and accustomed to some of the things that go on in here. And I just wanted to take these 2 minutes to a little bit speak to myself by speaking out loud and addressing the board to just sort of comment on some of the things that we saw today. You know, I used to get really worked up by some of the behavior that Commissioner Soboroff displays from the dais, and I've determined that that's a lost cause because it's so consistent, and in some ways I feel like it's intentional or perhaps even trolling. But like the moment when, again, I've spoken on it before, but presumably talking about LAPD, one of the people on the Board of Police Commissioners uses the pronoun we and us. Like, your mission statement is that you're supposed to be a separate, independent body who's overseeing LAPD and holding them accountable. So, you know, like, it's easy for that moment to go by, and there was a lot to speak on during that part of the meeting. But, like, I want to come back to that moment and say, you're people who sit on a board with someone who comports themselves like that. I really want to ask you, like, what is it like to be up there? If you're having conversations about it, like, you should tell us about that. I'd be interested in knowing about that. I'm speaking to the three of you. Commissioner Goldsmith, you know, thanking the chief for always speaking to the issues that concern you. Like, that's what we're saying. There's all this, like, there's this bureaucratic language. Like, it's not the words, it's the actions. Again, like, what is it like to sit with that cognitive dissonance when you're up there as the board of commissioners who's supposed to be overseeing the police department? And all these people come up and make these points. They must land with you. And it's 4-0 vote after 4-0 vote today, just down the line. You know, I'm not naive. I understand by now that this is how it works, but I also do want to take a second to be naive and name it and be outraged by it. And part of this, I think, is that you're coasting. Not a lot of people see this. Have meetings in other places at other times.
Thank you. That concludes the agenda. Is there a motion for adjournment? Second. All in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned until next week. Thank you very much.